Chapter 76. At this time, the village chief, who had regained his true memory due to the disappearance of the evil film, came to the few people and thanked them sincerely. "Thank you so much. Although the final result is a little different, we will pay you all the rewards promised for the mission." The village chief's words shocked Natsu and his companions. They were so focused on the villager's curse that they almost forgot that they would be rewarded after completing the mission. This was a real S-level mission, and the reward was extremely huge. 7 million J. Natsu and Happy's eyes sparkled with stars. One had countless grilled meats in his mind, while the other had countless grilled fish in his mind. The golden key. Lucy was also excited. In this mission reward, there was a precious golden key. The reason why she agreed to work with Natsu to complete this private S-level mission was because she was tempted by this golden key. However, when they were excitedly thinking about the reward, Urza shook her head at the village chief and said righteously, "We appreciate your kindness, but this is not a formal commission accepted by our guild. It's just a group of idiots who took action on their own. Therefore, even if the mission is completed, we will not charge a penny." Urza's words were heard by Natsu, Lucy, and Happy, and the excited faces of the three people suddenly turned pale, as if they were petrified. "No reward." The village chief looked at Urza in surprise, but he soon smiled and said, "Even so, no matter what, it is a fact that you helped us, so this is not considered as a reward for the mission, just as a thank you gift from a friend. What do you think?" "Since you said so." Urza pondered for a moment and said, "If it is a thank you gift from a friend, then I can't refuse it. But if we accept this thank you gift, it would be a violation of the guild's agreement, so let's just add the golden key in the reward." Hearing Urza's words, Natsu and Happy still looked ashen, but Lucy was the only one who cheered and jumped for joy. She was the only celestial mage among them, and this golden key must be hers if nothing unexpected happens. If she got this golden key, plus the Virgo golden key that Charlotte gave her last time in Harjan and the 3 she had, she would have 5 golden keys, almost half of all the golden keys. If other celestial mage knew that Lucy, a rookie mage, actually had 5 golden keys, they would probably immediately think of killing her to steal the keys. 5 golden keys. Charlotte, who was standing aside, looked at Lucy who was so happy, and thought to herself, if this goes on, she won't really be able to collect all the golden keys in the future. That would be interesting. As the villagers regained their memories, the mission of this cursed island was considered completed. After some discussion, everyone decided to leave here early the next morning. When Charlotte returned to her room to rest, she happened to see Urza dragging Natsu to a room nearby. After a while, Charlotte heard Natsu's extremely miserable wails coming from the room. Obviously, Natsu, the leader who took the S-level mission privately, was given a small punishment by Urza before accepting the guild's punishment. Lucy and Happy, who were on the other side, heard Natsu's miserable wails. One shrank her white neck, and the other shrank her cat head, both showing expressions of fear. As for Grey, he leaned against the wall, as if he didn't hear Natsu's wails at all, but just frowned and looked thoughtful. The next day, with the farewell of the villagers of the demon village, Charlotte and his party boarded the ship and left Karna Island. Sitting on the medium-sized fishing boat borrowed from Uncle Crew, Charlotte looked at the huge pirate ship sailing on the sea not far away, and couldn't help laughing. As expected of the fairy queen, her style of doing things is different. She actually robbed a pirate ship directly. On the pirate ship, in addition to Urza, there was also Natsu who was vomiting at the moment after being forcibly brought aboard by her. As for Lucy, Grey, and the kitten Happy, they were all on Charlotte's fishing boat. Charlotte looked back at Karna Island, where he could only see a black dot. With a turn of his 5 fingers on his right hand, a fist-sized crystal ball appeared in his hand. This crystal ball was an extremely rare communication magic crystal in the magic world that Urusha gave him before he left Karna Island. With this communication magic crystal, Charlotte and Urusha can communicate anytime and anywhere, which is very convenient. Thinking of this trip to Karna Island, Charlotte couldn't help but feel a little emotional. He gained a lot this time. Just from all the past he got from Urusha, he learned a lot of secrets that he didn't know before. Among them, there were secrets about the Dark Guild's Devil's Heart, the Council, and even the Fairy Queen Urza. What Urusha has experienced in these years is far more than what he, a newcomer wizard who has only been in the magic world for more than 2 years, has experienced. Of course, he, a newcomer wizard, is a veteran compared to Urusha, who has been in the magic world since he was a child. Compared to Lucy, who is a complete newcomer, he can be regarded as a senior. However, Compared to Arusha's past, what Charlotte values more is Arusha as a person. After sailing on the sea for a while, when they were about to arrive at Harjan, Charlotte suddenly said, "Lucy, I have something to tell you." "What's up?" "After returning to Harjan this time, I will be going with you to see your guild." Fairy Tale. Chapter 77. You want to go to our guild? Lucy shouted on the fishing boat, looking at Charlotte with surprise and joy, as if she was afraid that she had just heard it wrong. Charlotte smiled and nodded. "Why? You won't be unwelcome." No, of course you're welcome." Lucy waved her hands quickly and patted the blue kitten on the head with her tender little hand. "Happy, you also welcome Charlotte to Fairy Tale, right?" Although Happy was not happy about Lucy patting his head, when he heard her words, he still raised his two little cat paws cutely and called out, "Love." "Charlotte, don't worry, I will treat you well when you arrive at Fairy Tale." Lucy was excited, patting her majestic chest and assuring Charlotte. She seemed to put herself in the position of the host and wanted to do her best to be a good host for Charlotte, without any awareness of being a newcomer to the guild. "Thank you then." Seeing Lucy's enthusiasm, Charlotte felt a little amused, but he did not intend to discourage her enthusiasm. Instead, he smiled slightly and nodded in thanks. Lucy heard this, and the smile on her face became even brighter, but she had no idea that after Charlotte arrived at Fairy Tale, there was no need for her, a newcomer, to entertain him. He was very familiar with the top beauties in the guild. In fact, his original plan was to set off for Fairy Tale in the next few days, but he actually met Natsu and others who came out for a private mission. After thinking about it, he simply decided to wait for Natsu and others to complete the mission and then go together. Harjan. "Charlotte, I didn't expect you to come back with us to Fairy Tale." At the port, Charlotte moored the fishing boat, and Urza came up to her and said, "Apparently Lucy and the others told her about this." "Yes." Charlotte said with a smile, "The first guild in the kingdom of Fiori, I have long wanted to go and see it." "Yes." Urza nodded. As for what Charlotte said about the first guild in the kingdom of Fiori, she did not refute anything. To be precise, she had no idea of refutation at all, because she thought the same. Although in recent years, Fairy Tale has produced many powerful newcomers and has been the most popular, many people in all parts of the kingdom do think that it is the well-deserved first guild in the kingdom of Fiori. Although there are not many large guilds in Fiori, there are several. These guilds may not be as famous as Fairy Tale, but they also have good strength and many supporters. Therefore, the title of the first guild in the kingdom of Fiori has always been controversial, but Fairy Tale has the highest voice. However, Urza, who has always been proud of her guild, does not care about the rumors from the outside world. In her heart, Fairy Tale will always be the number one guild. Charlotte. After getting off the pirate ship, Natsu, who became lively again, came to Charlotte, grinned, rubbed his hands and said, "Let's duel before returning to the guild." Natsu was not very clear about Charlotte's strength. He only knew that Charlotte was very strong. For the strong, no matter whether they were enemies or friends, Natsu had the urge to fight him. "No." Charlotte turned around, facing Natsu with the back of her head, and rejected him bluntly. "Nanny, why?" Naz shouted in disbelief. He didn't seem to have thought that Charlotte would reject him. In his opinion, shouldn't a strong man like to fight? "You are not my opponent, so our fight is meaningless," Charlotte said calmly. "You guy, how do you know I'm not your opponent if we haven't fought before? Look, I'm going to knock you down with one punch." Feeling that he was being looked down upon, Natsu suddenly became angry, and regardless of whether Charlotte agreed or not, he immediately punched Charlotte. Fire dragons. Bump. Before he could utter the word iron fist, Natsu's fist stopped in the air, his eyes bulged out, and he fainted. With just one punch, Natsu was defeated. However, the one who did it was not Charlotte, but Urza. "All right, let's not waste any more time, let's start our journey back to the guild now." Urza held up the unconscious Natsu with one hand, a sharp light flashed in her eyes, and she swept towards Lucy and the others, saying, "I will decide your punishment immediately after we return to the guild." Urza's words immediately made Lucy and Happy pale, and they swallowed back the words that had just arisen in their hearts to complain about Natsu. Even Gray's eyelids twitched, as if he was thinking of some bad experiences. Then, the few people and the cat left the dock and headed for Harjan station. Before leaving, Urza took one last look at Charlotte. She could tell that Charlotte did not show any contempt or perfunctory meaning in his rejection of Natsu, but his calm tone revealed a strong sense of self-confidence. Do you believe in your own strength so much? Urza thought silently in her heart. However, she was not sure whether Charlotte really knew the true strength of Natsu. As a dragon slayer, his strength was not comparable to that of ordinary people when he was fighting with all his strength. If he already knew the characteristics and potential of the dragon slayer, but still acted so confidently, then Charlotte's strength is probably really unimaginable. Thinking of this, Urza couldn't help but think of the terrifying magic she felt before landing on Karna Island. What kind of hidden strength does this guy have? Chapter 78. You want to go to our guild? Lucy shouted on the fishing boat, looking at Charlotte with surprise and joy, as if she was afraid that she had just heard it wrong. Charlotte smiled and nodded. Why? You won't be unwelcome. No, of course you're welcome. Lucy waved her hands quickly and patted the blue kitten on the head with her tender little hand. Happy, you also welcome Charlotte to Fairy Tale, right? Although Happy was not happy about Lucy patting his head, when he heard her words, he still raised his two little cat paws cutely and called out, Love. Charlotte, don't worry, I will treat you well when you arrive at Fairy Tale. Lucy was excited, patting her majestic chest and assuring Charlotte, she seemed to put herself in the position of the host and wanted to do her best to be a good host for Charlotte, without any awareness of being a newcomer to the guild. Thank you then. Seeing Lucy's enthusiasm, Charlotte felt a little amused, but he did not intend to discourage her enthusiasm. Instead, he smiled slightly and nodded in thanks. Lucy heard this, and the smile on her face became even brighter, but she had no idea that after Charlotte arrived at Fairy Tale, there was no need for her, a newcomer, to entertain him. He was very familiar with the top beauties in the guild. In fact, his original plan was to set off for Fairy Tale in the next few days, but he actually met Natsu and others who came out for a private mission. After thinking about it, he simply decided to wait for Natsu and others to complete the mission and then go together. Harjan. Charlotte, I didn't expect you to come back with us to Fairy Tale. At the port, Charlotte moored the fishing boat, and Urza came up to her and said, apparently Lucy and the others told her about this. Yes. Charlotte said with a smile, the first guild in the kingdom of Fiori, I have long wanted to go and see it. Yes. Urza nodded. As for what Charlotte said about the first guild in the kingdom of Fiori, she did not refute anything. To be precise, she had no idea of refutation at all, because she thought the same. Although in recent years, Fairy Tale has produced many powerful newcomers and has been the most popular, many people in all parts of the kingdom do think that it is the well-deserved first guild in the kingdom of Fiori. Although there are not many large guilds in Fiori, there are several. These guilds may not be as famous as Fairy Tale, but they also have good strength and many supporters. Therefore, the title of the first guild in the kingdom of Fiori has always been controversial, but Fairy Tale has the highest voice. However, Urza, who has always been proud of her guild, does not care about the rumors from the outside world. In her heart, Fairy Tale will always be the number one guild. Charlotte. After getting off the pirate ship, Natsu, who became lively again, came to Charlotte, grinned, rubbed his hands and said, let's duel before returning to the guild. Natsu was not very clear about Charlotte's strength. He only knew that Charlotte was very strong. For the strong, no matter whether they were enemies or friends, Natsu had the urge to fight him. No. Charlotte turned around, facing Natsu with the back of her head, and rejected him bluntly. Nanny, why? Naz. Shouted in disbelief. He didn't seem to have thought that Charlotte would reject him. In his opinion, shouldn't a strong man like to fight? You are not my opponent, so our fight is meaningless. Charlotte said calmly. You guy, how do you know I'm not your opponent if we haven't fought before? Look, I'm going to knock you down with one punch. Feeling that he was being looked down upon, Natsu suddenly became angry, and regardless of whether Charlotte agreed or not, he immediately punched Charlotte. Fire dragons. Bump. Before he could utter the word iron fist, Natsu's fist stopped in the air, his eyes bulged out, and he fainted. With just one punch, Natsu was defeated. However, the one who did it was not Charlotte, but Urza. All right, let's not waste any more time, let's start our journey back to the guild now. Urza held up the unconscious Natsu with one hand, a sharp light flashed in her eyes, and she swept towards Lucy and the others, saying, I will decide your punishment immediately after we return to the guild. Urza's words immediately made Lucy and Happy pale, and they swallowed back the words that had just arisen in their hearts to complain about Natsu. Even Gray's eyelids twitched, as if he was thinking of some bad experiences. Then, the few people and the cat left the dock and headed for Harjan station. Before leaving, Urza took one last look at Charlotte. She could tell that Charlotte did not show any contempt or perfunctory meaning in his rejection of Natsu, but his calm tone revealed a strong sense of self-confidence. Do you believe in your own strength so much? Urza thought silently in her heart. However, she was not sure whether Charlotte really knew the true strength of Natsu. As a dragon slayer, his strength was not comparable to that of ordinary people when he was fighting with all his strength. If he already knew the characteristics and potential of the dragon slayer, but still acted so confidently, then Charlotte's strength is probably really unimaginable. Thinking of this, Urza couldn't help but think of the terrifying magic she felt before landing on Karna Island. What kind of hidden strength does this guy have? Chapter 79. Long time no see, Myra. Myra, who was facing Urza and didn't notice the other side, suddenly heard a familiar yet strange voice from the side, and her expression suddenly froze. Urza, who was standing in front of her, clearly saw Myra's delicate body tremble slightly just now. With a little trepidation, Myra slowly turned around, and immediately Charlotte's figure came into her sight. Looking at this handsome face that she hadn't seen for 2 years, but had entered her dreams countless times in the past 2 years, at this moment, she had all kinds of emotions in her heart, including happiness, surprise, and this little bit of resentment. She had many things she wanted to say to Charlotte, but in the end, she just said the same thing. Long time no see, Charlotte. When saying this, Mirana's face, which was originally filled with sorrow, once again showed that gentle and beautiful smile. However, in Charlotte's opinion, if it weren't for the destruction of the guild, this smile should be brighter and more beautiful. Hey, Ms. Myra, you know Charlotte? Looking at Charlotte and Myra looking at each other, Lucy suddenly asked. Not only Lucy, but also Natsu, Urza, Gray and Happy all wanted to know this question, but they had never heard them mention each other. Myra smiled and said, yes, he and I have known each other for 2 years. 2 years ago? Have you known each other for so long? Lucy asked in surprise. But why have I never heard you mention it, Myra? Natsu asked in confusion. I didn't know you knew Charlotte. At this point, Myra looked at Charlotte again, with a little resentment in her eyes, and said, besides, he is just a man who doesn't keep his word. What's there to mention? Breaking one's word. Arisa and the others all looked at Charlotte in surprise. The word Myra revealed a lot of information. Their eyes moved between the two of them several times, and they all had the same idea in their hearts. There must be a story between the two of them. The strong fire of gossip burned in the hearts of several people. As for Charlotte, after hearing Myra's straightforward words, an embarrassed expression suddenly appeared on his face. Of course, he knew what Myra meant by breaking one's word, but the fault was originally his, so he couldn't refute it at all, and he wouldn't refute it. But when Myra saw the embarrassed expression on Charlotte's face, it was as if she had discovered a new world. She blinked her beautiful eyes with a little inexplicable smile in the corners of her eyes. The resentment she had originally had towards Charlotte disappeared without a trace under this circumstance. No trace. In her memory, Charlotte had never had an expression of embarrassment. To be precise, in her memory, Charlotte had no expression at all, except for the last time they parted, when, at the request of the little girl Lysina, she saw the few moments when this cold guy had the most rich expressions. The rest of the time, he was very indifferent. She hadn't noticed it when she saw Charlotte just now, but now after observing him carefully, she found that compared to 2 years ago, the latter had changed a lot, and this change was not just on the surface. This discovery immediately made her heart start to become active, and all kinds of thoughts appeared in her mind, but she suddenly thought of something, and these thoughts were all suppressed by her. She said to Charlotte with an apologetic look. Charlotte, originally I should have treated you well this time, but as you have seen, our guild has had some accidents. Can we postpone your reception? As soon as Charlotte said this, before he could say anything, Natsu and the others suddenly woke up, and the gossip fire burning in their hearts instantly dissipated. They almost forgot the important things because of these two people. Urza said with a gloomy face, Myra, what's going on? Why would the phantom suddenly attack us? Myra said, Everyone is staying in the basement of the guild for the time being. Let's go down and talk about the specific situation. Hearing this, Urza and her companions immediately walked towards the entrance of the underground floor of the guild without any delay. Before leaving, Lucy glanced at Myra and Charlotte who were standing there without moving, and then followed Urza and her companions. After they left, Myra and Charlotte were the only ones left there. Thinking of what Myra had just said, Charlotte said, "Forget about entertaining me. I am the one who should apologize." "You are right. It is indeed me who broke my promise." "Okay, it was just a joke, why take it so seriously?" Myra smiled with narrowed eyes. But after she finished speaking, a cunning light flashed in her eyes, and she said, "Of course, if you feel bad, you can compensate me later." "How do you want me to compensate you?" Charlotte asked. "I want..." Myra's dark eyes rolled around, and she put her index finger on her smooth chin, pretending to be thinking hard, and finally dragged out a long tail sound and said, "Hey, I haven't thought about this yet, but when I think about it, you can't go back on your word." "You dragged your voice," Charlotte rolled his eyes at her and said something unhappily, but he still nodded heavily and said firmly, "Then think about it slowly, as long as I can do it, I will never break my promise." "Don't worry, you can do it." Myra looked at Charlotte meaningfully. This look made Charlotte feel a chill in his heart. He was sure that Myra's compensation at that time would not be simple. Then, Myra began to lead Charlotte to the basement of the guild. However, halfway through the walk, Myra suddenly stopped, turned her head to look at Charlotte, revealed a dark expression, and said, "There is something I think I need to tell you in advance." Chapter 80. What's the matter? Charlotte was stunned at first, then asked when she saw Myra suddenly stop. Myra pointed to the entrance of the guild basement and said, "Lysina is down there now." Lysina, hearing Myra's words, Charlotte's mind suddenly appeared with the pretty face of the girl with short silver hair. Myra continued, "In the past 2 years, Lysina has been thinking about you all the time. I often heard her hiding in her bed and sobbing secretly at night, and she kept repeating your name. She would ask me the same question every once in a while." "What's the problem?" Charlotte asked. "She asked me, 'Have you forgotten us?'" Myra said. "How could it be?" Charlotte said loudly. He stared at Myra, took a deep breath, and said seriously, "Whether it is you or Lysina, I have never forgotten." As for the guy with the same white hair, for some reason, he was directly ignored by Charlotte. Even Myra didn't feel that there was anything wrong with Charlotte's words at this moment. But when she heard Charlotte say that he had never forgotten her, a warm current flowed through her heart. She felt as if her heart was watered with honey, very sweet. Her eyes met Charlotte's, and she smiled gently, "I know, and I believe Lysina must think so too. The reason why she always asks me such questions is just because she misses you too much." Charlotte lowered his head slightly, and said in a low tone, "Lysina must hate me now. I clearly promised her at the beginning." Upon hearing this, Myra immediately said, "Don't worry. Lysina must be so happy to see you, how could she hate you? Moreover, although we only met you once 2 years ago, some things are so strange. I can feel that Lysina has a deep attachment to you. Sometimes I even think that I, her biological sister, may not have as high a status as you in her heart." At the end, Myra rolled her beautiful eyes at Charlotte, and there was a hint of jealousy in her tone. That was the sister she brought up, but her status was not as high as that of a brother she had only met once. How could she not feel jealous? Really? Charlotte didn't care about Myra's jealousy. After hearing Myra's words, a bright smile appeared on his face. He curled his lips and said happily with pride in his tone, "I am his brother and he is his sister. Isn't it normal for her to be attached to me?" Myra couldn't help but laugh at Charlotte's proud look. She didn't expect that Charlotte would have such a childish side. It seemed that being able to get his sister's attachment was something that made him extremely proud. Especially what Charlotte said, which made her narrow her eyes slightly, and she thought secretly, could this Charlotte be a sister control? Once this idea appeared, it lingered in Myra's mind for a long time. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that this was the case. Charlotte was definitely a sister control. Moreover, after this idea appeared, another terrible idea arose in her mind. "Lysina, you're not a brother Khan." Thinking of Lysina's situation in the past 2 years, Myra also thought that this was a possibility. A sister Khan? A brother Khan? They had only met once, so why did she? Thinking of this, Myra really didn't know what to say. However, let's not talk about the two of them. Think about yourself. You have only met Charlotte once. Don't you also have some feelings for Charlotte in your heart? Let's go. At this time, Charlotte suddenly spoke, with a firm look in her eyes. I was wrong first. No matter how Lysina blames me later, I have no complaints, and no matter what she asks, I will accept it one by one, as long as she can be happy. After hearing what Charlotte said, Myra was more certain that this guy was a living sister control. However, after hearing what Charlotte said about agreeing to any request, she couldn't help but feel moved. This was any request, and there was no limit on the number. Thinking about what she had just asked Charlotte to compensate her, she suddenly felt that she was a bit at a disadvantage. The more she thought about it, the more Myra felt that she had to cherish this opportunity for compensation. She had to consider it carefully at that time, and it must be worth the money. Next, Charlotte followed Myra into the underground floor of the guild. As soon as they entered, all kinds of noisy voices rang out. Charlotte could hear that many of them were scolding the phantom ghost. Obviously, the phantom ghost's destruction of their guild this time caused all of them to angry. This basement is not too big, and now most of the members of Fairy Tale are gathered here, making it seem even more crowded. As soon as he came in, Charlotte's eyes began to look around. The first thing he saw was Urzanatsu and others surrounding President Makarov. They were all very excited, but Makarov was sitting on a wine barrel calmly, holding a wine glass in his hand. He looked very calm, as if even the destruction of the guild did not affect him. However, Charlotte's gaze only paused for a moment and then immediately shifted away, continuing to look elsewhere. Soon, the back of the girl with short silver hair in his memory came into his sight. At this time, Myra had already walked towards the girl, and she shouted, "Lysina! Sister Myra!" The short-haired girl turned around, and that sweet and lovely face was Lysina. "Lysina, look who's here!" Myra smiled and made way, exposing Charlotte behind her to Lysina's sight. Charlotte had a smile on her face, and looked at Lysina with a smile. The moment she saw Charlotte, Lysina rubbed her eyes with her hands and muttered cutely, "Are you hallucinating again?" That cute look made Charlotte laugh immediately, and at the same time, she loved this little girl even more in her heart. It is not difficult to imagine that the latter must have fantasized about the scene of her coming countless times in the past 2 years, so this is why. After rubbing her eyes several times in a row, she found that Charlotte's figure was still standing there very clearly, without any sign of disappearing. She understood that this time, it was really Charlotte who came to find him. Almost in an instant, crystal tears burst out of her eyes, and Lysina ran out. In the unbelievable eyes of the surrounding Fairy Tale members, she flew into Charlotte's arms and hugged the latter tightly with her arms. "Brother Charlotte! Lysina misses you so much." Chapter 81. Brother Charlotte, Lysina misses you so much. In the basement, Lysina pounced on Charlotte lightly like a young swallow returning to the nest. Almost at the moment when Lysina pounced on him, Charlotte had already opened his arms, and then hugged the girl's soft body tightly in his arms. Hearing the girl's crisp voice with strong longing, he felt his heart melt at this moment. His cheek was pressed against Lysina's short silver hair, smelling the girl's fragrance, and whispered softly in her ear, "Brother misses Lysina too." Around the two of them, all the members of Fairy Tale were staring at this scene in amazement, and their brain circuits could not turn around for a while. Looking at this man who made the sweet girl Lysina of their guild throw herself into his arms, and who was so handsome, they all had a big question mark in their hearts. Who is this guy? Miss Myra, who is that person? Is he new here? Seeing Lysina throwing herself into Charlotte's arms and showing no signs of leaving, soon a guild member couldn't help but ask Lysina's sister, Myra. But Myra's eyes were always on Charlotte and Lysina hugging each other. She didn't even mean to answer this member. Even whether she heard what this person said might be a question. At this moment, Lysina, who was leaning against Charlotte's chest, suddenly raised her head, stared at Charlotte with watery eyes, pouted her mouth, and said angrily, "Brother Charlotte, you are lying." Although she was questioning someone, Lysina's hands were still wrapped around Charlotte with no intention of letting go, as if she was questioning him and was rubbing him. "If you, Brother Charlotte, really miss Lysina, you wouldn't have not come to see me for such a long time. It's obvious that you haven't thought about Lysina, you big liar." Lysina pouted her lips and looked very aggrieved. Seeing Lysina's aggrieved look, Charlotte quickly comforted her, it's all brother's fault. You can punish brother in any way you want, but brother really didn't lie to you just now. I really miss Lysina, thinking about her every day. It can be seen that after hearing Charlotte's words, Lysina's pouting little mouth obviously went down a little, and it was obvious that Charlotte's words touched her heart. Seeing this, Charlotte immediately continued, besides, brother has never forgotten what he promised Lysina. Lysina, do you remember that you told me at that time to let me laugh often, because, brother Charlotte is the most handsome when he laughs. As he said, Charlotte showed a smile that he thought was the most handsome, and said, brother Charlotte has always done this. Do you think it's handsome, Lysina? Although 2 years have passed, Lysina has never forgotten the scene when she parted with Charlotte, and she remembers clearly what she said to Charlotte at that time. Brother Charlotte, who was very cold in her memory, actually changed because of what she said at the time and became cheerful and laughed. This change not only made Lysina feel closer to Charlotte, but also made her understand that Charlotte cared about her, which made her happiest. Looking at Charlotte's handsome smile, Lysina's mouth was no longer pouting. Her cute little face was flushed, and she whispered, handsome. Not to mention Lysina, who was leaning on Charlotte's arms, even the girls of the fairy tale guild around her, when they saw Charlotte's handsome smile, they had the urge to become crazy about him. Charlotte! At this moment, a loud shout suddenly came from the side. Along with the shout came a sturdy, rough-faced, white-haired man. It turned out to be Elfman. Charlotte smiled faintly when he saw the person coming, and his tone was not as gentle as when he met Myra and Lysina before. Compared with 2 years ago, Elfman's figure has become a bit more sturdy, and the muscles in his arms give people a sense of explosive power at a glance. However, the power of this world is not measured by muscles. As soon as Elfman came up, he plucked up the muscles of his arms and said in a loud voice, Charlotte, you guy, it took you so long to come to see us. Do you know how many times Myra and Lysina have cried because of you? As a man, how can you let your sisters cry? This Elfman actually came up to blame. However, Charlotte did not pay attention to him first, but turned his gaze to Myra. Elfman said that it was not only Lysina who was crying, but also Myra. Seeing Charlotte suddenly looking at her, Myra also heard what Elfman said. While secretly cursing Elfman in her heart, she quickly looked away guiltily and ignored him. Seeing this, Charlotte knew that what Elfman said was true. He sighed in his heart, but just when he was about to say something to Elfman, Lysina, who had been clinging to his arms and refused to leave, suddenly let go of his hand, broke away from his arms, and turned to look at Elfman. She glared at Elfman and shouted, Brother Elfman, you are so unreasonable. How can you say that to Brother Charlotte? Didn't Brother Charlotte say that he had something important to complete when he left? He must have been delayed by something important, so he came to see us so late. After hearing Lysina's words, the whole place fell silent. This dramatic scene shocked the members of Fairy Tale. They stared at Lysina blankly. The fierce look that Lysina had just shown, like protecting her child, made them wonder if she was still the lively and lovely Guild Pistachio they knew. Then, their eyes wandered between Charlotte and Elfman. They both called each other brother, but why was Lysina's attitude towards them so different? Especially those who knew the relationship between Lysina and Elfman, they pondered deeply about a question. Who of these two is the real brother? Chapter 82. Who is the biological brother? If we simply consider blood relationship as the basis for this question, then the answer is undoubtedly Elfman. But if we put aside blood relationship and look at Lysina's attitude towards the two just now, no matter which aspect it is obvious that the one named Charlotte is more like Lysina's biological brother, while Elfman seems to be someone who was picked up. Even the crowd watching had such feelings, not to mention the two brothers involved, Charlotte and Elfman. Seeing that Lysina actually stood up for herself at this time, and the person who stood up for her was her biological brother, Charlotte understood more clearly what kind of status she held in the former's heart. He exudes the attribute of sister control, and he is so beautiful now. Compared to Charlotte, Elfman is in a terrible mood now. Lysina, I. Elfman opened his mouth and looked at Lysina, his rough face full of innocence. He didn't understand why Lysina, who was usually well-behaved and respectful to him, his sister, who is good at dealing with things, would talk back to him when he was about to stand up for her. In the past 2 years, he had seen Myra or Lysina secretly crying because of Charlotte several times. That's why he started to blame Charlotte even though he knew that Charlotte was his savior, just to vent his anger for his sister. But the final outcome was beyond his expectations. However, although his brain was not well developed, it was not too stupid, and he quickly understood the reason. He looked at Charlotte, and at this moment, he had the same idea as everyone else: am I really my biological brother? When his cute little sister suddenly contradicted him, Elfman naturally couldn't talk back. He hesitated for a long time, and finally looked at Charlotte with grievance, lowered his head, and chose to admit his fault with a very good attitude. At the same time, he made a decision in his heart that he would never say a word against Charlotte in front of Lysina again, otherwise, the heart of my dear brother is broken. Charlotte said, Lysina, I came here in such a hurry that I forgot to bring you a gift, so I plan to make something for you. No need, brother Charlotte, I'm already very happy that you can come to Lysina. Lysina smiled sweetly. Charlotte shook his head and said, this is a must, and I believe that you will be happier after I finish this. Snap. After that, Charlotte snapped his fingers lightly under the puzzled eyes of everyone. After that, Charlotte looked at Lysina and smiled, let's go up and show me your favorite guild. Lysina did not understand the deep meaning of Charlotte's words. After hearing his words, she said in a low tone, I also want to show brother Charlotte around the guild, but the guild has already been closed. Brother Charlotte, you should have seen it when you came. On the side, Myra had been paying attention to Charlotte all the time. When Charlotte snapped his fingers, he vaguely caught a strange energy coming from him. Combined with Charlotte's words, her eyes suddenly lit up and she thought to herself, could it be that? At this moment, there was a burst of hurried footsteps at the entrance of the basement, and then a buck-toothed man rushed down and shouted to everyone, everyone! Everyone, hurry up and take a look. What happened? Why are you so anxious? Said Makao, an older member of the guild, looking at the buck-toothed man. Anyway, you will know when you go up, it is really incredible. Said the buck-toothed man, with a very rich expression. Really, when did you learn to keep people in suspense? Wakaba, who is also an older member of the guild, said unhappily, but his pace was not slow at the same time. The members of Fairy Tale, who were aroused by the buck-toothed man, all walked towards the exit one by one. Let's go out and take a look too. Charlotte took Lysina's hand and led her to the exit. Myra, who had already guessed something, and Elfman, who looked confused, also followed. On the other side, Makarov, who was sitting on the wine barrel, glanced at Charlotte's back inconspicuously, a gleam of light flashed in his eyes, then jumped off the wine barrel, and said as he walked, let's go out too. Hey, old man, you haven't explained it to us yet. How can we just let it go? I must beat them up. Looking at Makarov, Natsu yelled, obviously still angry about the destruction of the guild, and Makarov's indifferent attitude also made him angry. Why is the old man so calm? Gray was also puzzled. The president must be very unwilling to accept this. Urza was the only one who saw it more clearly. She said, I think it's probably because the council banned armed fighting between guilds, so the president. But they were the first to start, weren't they? Natsu said angrily. In short, the president will know what to do. Urza said, and then followed the crowd, let's go out and take a look, I don't know what happened outside. Hearing Urza's words, although Natsu and the others were still unwilling, they had to give up and walked out together. At this time, outside, a tall and imposing building stood in front of the street. Although some parts of the building showed signs of damage, it was still intact as a whole. A sign with the words Fairy Tale was hung in front of the gate. This building was the Fairy Tale Guild. However, the guild at this time did not look like the guild that had been in ruins a few minutes ago, with huge iron bars inserted all over it. It was now intact. The Fairy Tale people who came out of the basement saw the restored guild, and they all widened their eyes, looking at this familiar guild. It was simply unbelievable. Chapter 83. This. In front of the guild gate, a group of people looked at the restored guild with disbelief in their eyes and remained speechless for a long time. If they had not seen the guild in such a dilapidated state before, they would definitely think that they were dreaming. Let's go in and take a look. After standing there in a daze for a while, Makao was the first to shout, and then he couldn't wait to rush into the guild. Seeing this, the other members immediately followed. Then, cheers of excitement and joy rang out in the guild. It's amazing, everything is really restored. It's exactly the same as before it was destroyed. I don't know how to express my feelings. Even the wine is still the same as before, incredible, really incredible. At the same time, outside the guild. Like these members, the Myra sisters also saw the guild restored to its original state after coming out. Lysina covered her mouth with her hands and looked at Charlotte with surprise. "Brother Charlotte, did you do this?" Charlotte nodded and smiled. "How is it, are you happy?" "I am so happy. Brother Charlotte is the best." Lysina cheered and praised Charlotte without reservation. When she saw the guild was destroyed, she was sad for a long time. Before Charlotte came, she was still a little depressed. It was not until Charlotte appeared that the long-lost joy washed away the depression. Now seeing the guild restored to its original state, and it was her brother Charlotte who made it for her, she was almost overwhelmed with joy. "Brother Charlotte, this is a reward for you." Lysina suddenly stood on tiptoe and pecked Charlotte's left cheek lightly, offering her sweet kiss. "I'll go into the guild first." After saying that, Lysina took light steps and ran into the guild with a red face. Looking at Lysina's back, Charlotte chuckled and thought to himself, "Is the little girl shy?" As soon as Lysina left, only Charlotte and Myra were left here. As for Elfman, he had already followed Matteo and the others into the guild first. That was Lysina's first kiss. Myra looked at Charlotte with a hint of amusement in her tone. "Ahem, is that so? Charlotte." Charlotte heard this and coughed twice, saying it calmly, hiding the emotions in her heart perfectly. Myra just stared at Charlotte's face, her mouth slightly curved, as if she had completely seen through Charlotte's thoughts. She thought to herself, "This deep sister control must be very happy now. Let's go in together. I think if everyone knew that you restored the guild, they would be very grateful to you," Myra said with a smile. Upon hearing this, Charlotte just smiled casually. He didn't care much about the gratitude of those people. The only thing that made him care was the sweet kiss that Lysina gave him just now. After the two entered the guild, Makarov and Natsu, who came out of the basement last, were the only ones outside the guild. Looking at the restored guild, Makarov suddenly sighed, "This boy named Charlotte is really not simple." "Hey, President, do you mean that Charlotte did this?" Lucy, who was standing by, was surprised when she heard Makarov's words. Urza looked at the guild and pondered for a moment, then said, "Although it is very weak, I can feel a trace of Charlotte's power from it. There is no doubt that Charlotte did it." Yoshi. The guild was restored. Although Natsu was still furious at the ghost who destroyed the guild, his mood had obviously improved. He praised, "I don't know how you did it, but Charlotte did a great job." Gray beside him nodded in agreement. After learning that their guild was restored by Charlotte, all the members of Fairy Tale were very enthusiastic about Charlotte, a strange boy. Under the encouragement of Matteo and other old hands, the guild even held a party on the spot, and toasted Charlotte crazily to express their gratitude. Especially the unrestrained girl named Kana, who came directly with several barrels of wine, and it seemed that she wanted to get Charlotte drunk here. Fortunately, Lysina, who felt sorry for Charlotte, came up and pulled Kana away, otherwise Charlotte might have forced herself to drink the barrels of wine that Kana brought. Everyone's enthusiasm made Charlotte, who came here for the first time, feel as if he had known these guys for many years, and the unfamiliarity that should have been there seemed to be skipped directly. But to some extent, this also shows that each of them has a deep love for this guild. Just as Lysina said when she invited Charlotte to join the guild 2 years ago, this place is not just a guild, but more like a home. Every guild member gets along like a family. That is why they are so enthusiastic about Charlotte, who has repaired their home. Seeing that her brother Charlotte has integrated into the atmosphere of the guild so quickly and is so popular, Lysina is so happy. After all, both Fairy Tale and Charlotte are her favorites. Looking at Charlotte, who is accepting Urza's toast, Lysina's dark eyes are full of spirituality. The idea that has been in her heart for 2 years has emerged again, especially when she thinks of the huge changes in Charlotte after meeting her this time, and her love for her. She secretly thinks in her heart, "I think brother Charlotte will reject me this time." Chapter 84. The party held for Charlotte lasted until the evening. The guild was in a mess because the party had just ended. Wine barrels and wine glasses were placed everywhere, and many drunk members were lying on the floor or on the table. Charlotte sat alone on one of the relatively clean tables, raised his wine glass, and drank the wine in the glass in one gulp. At this time, a wine barrel suddenly fell on the table in front of him with a bang. "You can drink quite well, Charlotte." A sexy woman with long dark brown hair and unrestrained clothes leaned on a wine barrel and looked at Charlotte with admiration. Charlotte looked up at the woman and said, "I'm still far behind you, Kana." This unrestrainedly dressed woman was Kana, who impressed Charlotte the most at this party. Of course, this so-called impression naturally refers to the latter's alcohol tolerance. In this party, the one who drank the most was definitely Kana, who was drinking with a wine barrel. Although her eyes were a little misty and her face was flushed, judging from the way she walked just now, she seemed to still have energy to spare. It has to be said that this girl is many times stronger than these big men lying on the ground when it comes to drinking. How about it, are you interested in having another drink with me? Kana patted the barrel and said. Haha, are you sure it's one glass? Charlotte said, glancing at the barrel in Kana's hand. The meaning was self-evident. Then why don't you come over? Kana patted the barrel again and started to provoke. But when she was provoking, a beautiful figure suddenly walked over. Kana, brother Charlotte has drunk enough today, so I can't continue to drink with you. Besides, you've already drunk too much today. The president has stipulated that you can't drink too much in a day. This beautiful figure is Lisana. Tisk. After hearing Lisana's words, Kana's provocative look suddenly became dull. She finally found a good drinking buddy, but she didn't expect Lisana to spoil her fun. Okay, I won't make it difficult for your good brother. She curled her lips, picked up the wine barrel on the table, and walked towards the door. However, halfway through, she suddenly stopped, turned her head to look at Charlotte, and a card appeared in her hand, and she threw it at Charlotte. Charlotte, if you want to drink, you can always come to me. After saying that, she held the barrel and strode out of the guild. When the card flew in front of Charlotte, it suddenly stopped in the air, and a small magic circle appeared on it. Then the card turned into a light spot and formed a pattern in the air. The pattern was very clear. Both Charlotte and Lisana could see that it was a route map, and from what Kana said when she left just now, it was obviously a route map to her home. After casually glancing at it and writing down the route above, Charlotte chuckled and said, "Card magic? Quite interesting. Brother Charlotte, don't drink so much in the future, it's bad for your health." Lisana said softly. Got it. Charlotte smiled at Lisana. Charlotte rubbed his temples gently. He didn't feel anything when he was drinking just now, but now that he didn't drink, he felt a little dizzy. He used his mental power slightly, and the feeling disappeared. However, through this party, he had a clearer understanding of his alcohol tolerance. In the previous 2 years, he often went to pubs in various cities because he wanted to inquire about the news, but at that time he only had a few drinks in the pub, which did not reflect his alcohol tolerance at all. In this party, facing the bombardment of people from a guild, he actually survived easily. This shows that his alcohol tolerance is high, otherwise he would not have been recognized and appreciated by Kana, the recognized super alcoholic of fairy tale. Brother Charlotte, here. A fair little hand held a wine glass and stretched it in front of Charlotte. Lisana smiled sweetly and said, "This is juice. You will feel better after drinking it." Obviously, Lisana saw Charlotte rubbing his temple just now, and knew that Charlotte was drunk, so she specially poured a glass of juice for Charlotte. Charlotte took the juice handed over by Lisana, and his heart was full of happiness. What a good sister! Such a good sister, shouldn't she be spoiled for a lifetime? Just as Charlotte was drinking the juice with a happy face, Myra suddenly came over and told Charlotte something. "Your president wants to see me." Hearing Myra's words, Charlotte was slightly stunned. "Yes." Myra nodded. "Why do you want to see me?" "I don't know him well." Charlotte was still drinking juice. "Oh, you'll know when you go there, right?" Myra rolled her eyes at Carlosya when she heard his words. "Come on, brother Charlotte, let's go together." Lisana took Charlotte's hand and walked to a room in the guild with Myra. In the room, Makarov's small body sat on a chair. He looked a little drunk. Obviously, he drank a lot of wine at this party. After seeing Myra and Lisana bring Charlotte in, Makarov immediately jumped off the chair and walked in front of Charlotte. His slightly drunk expression suddenly became serious. He took off his hat and bowed to Charlotte at a 90-degree angle. "Charlotte, I'm here to express my sincere gratitude to you," Makarov said while bowing. Makarov's behavior made Charlotte slightly startled, a little confused. You know, Makarov is the president of a large guild, and he, apart from his strength, is just a nobody in terms of reputation. Makarov took off his hat and bowed 90 degrees to Charlotte. "That was a super gift. He didn't think that just restoring the guild was worthy of such a gift from Makarov, the head of the guild. If it's just to help you repair the guild. Charlotte thought for a moment and said, President Makarov, there's no need to do this. Many people in the guild are my friends, not to mention that I'm Lisena's brother. No matter what the reason is, this is what I should do. Charlotte's words made people feel very comfortable. At least Myra and Lisena smiled at the same time after hearing it. However, Makarov's expression was still very serious. He said solemnly, I am also very grateful to you for repairing our guild, but I called you here this time to thank you for not this matter. Chapter 85. Isn't it this matter? Charlotte was slightly stunned when he heard Makarov's words. If he remembered correctly, including this time, he had only met this old man twice. Apart from the restoration of the guild this time, he really couldn't think of any other things that were worthy of the old man's gratitude for such a big gift. Makarov said, it was the incident 2 years ago. 2 years ago? When mentioning this time, Charlotte just thought about it for a moment, and then he suddenly understood what Makarov was talking about. He first glanced at Myra and Lisena, then said, you are talking about what happened in the Beast King Mountains. Yes, that's the thing. Makarov nodded and said, whether it's Myra, Lisena, or Elfman, they are all my precious children. After the mission 2 years ago, Myra came to me alone to admit her mistake and told me the whole process of the mission. 2 years ago, when Myra accepted the mission, I had already told her the danger of this mission, but I think you should also know that Myra was a strong-willed child at the time. Since she was determined to accept the mission, even I, the president, could not stop her. Moreover, wizards are never gentle professions. While possessing great power, they are also accompanied by various dangers. So since Myra had decided to carry out the mission of defeating the Beast King, as the president, I still did not stop her even though I knew there were huge dangers involved. Of course, I also thought at the time that with Myra's strength, even if she was defeated by the Beast King in the end, she would be able to escape unscathed. At most, the mission would fail, and it would be good for her to suffer a little setback. However, from what Myra told me, I realized that I still underestimated the danger of that mission. If it weren't for you, Charlotte, who showed up in time, I couldn't imagine what the final result would be. Perhaps, I would have lost these children forever. So, here, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you, Charlotte, once again. Thank you for saving these children. At this point, Makarov bowed deeply to Charlotte again, and the words from the heart made Charlotte silent. While Makarov was speaking, he could feel that the old man's inner emotions were fluctuating greatly. Obviously, the incident 2 years ago had touched him deeply, and he even blamed himself. Perhaps as the president, he was not wrong in this matter, and everything was caused by Myra's arrogance, but as he said, Myra and the others were not only his members, but also his most cherished children. If the children did something wrong, he, as an elder, had the responsibility to bear the blame. Not to mention anything else, just this point alone, Makarov, the president, is worthy of Charlotte's admiration. President, Myra. And Lisena's eyes were red. It was the first time they saw the usually kind and funny president put on such an attitude and thanked a boy who was several generations younger than him. They all understood Makarov's good intentions. All of this was for them. President Makarov, you are so polite. Charlotte raised his right hand out of thin air, and an invisible force lifted up the bowing Makarov, allowing him to straighten his back again. He smiled and said, I have already said it just now, Myra and the others are all my friends, and Lisena even considers me her brother. Maybe the reason why I rescued them 2 years ago was not because of these reasons, but I have already saved them, and I have accepted your gratitude. Let's just let this matter pass. Anyway, the final ending is good, isn't it? Moreover, 2 years ago, Lisena kept telling me that Fairy Tale was the best guild in the world, but I just didn't believe it at that time. Now, with a great president like you, I believe that Fairy Tale can indeed be called the best guild. May ha 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 ha, thank you for the compliment, but as the president, I have made an indelible contribution to the development of Fairy Tale, ha ha ha. After Charlotte finished speaking, Makarov, who had a serious face, suddenly laughed without any warning. His serious expression instantly turned into complacency, and his 2 mustaches trembled as he laughed, which looked very funny. Especially his seemingly humble but boastful words, which made Myra and Lisena on the side frown. The pride that had just risen up in them disappeared without a trace. They thought to themselves, President, can't you be more reserved in front of Charlotte, Charlotte's brother? This sudden change also made Charlotte stunned. He raised his hand and rubbed his head, frowning and said, "Oh, I just drank too much and said some drunken words accidentally. I'm really sorry. Don't take what I said just now seriously. Charlotte, a magician should be honest. I could feel the sincerity from your heart in your words just now. They are absolutely the truth. But President Makarov, I'm really drunk, and when I'm drunk my favorite thing to do is to lie. There's no point pretending to be drunk. I will always remember what you just said." "Then you should remember it, I didn't say that anyway." On the side, watching Makarov and Charlotte bickering so funny, and Charlotte even playing tricks, this scene made the beautiful sisters couldn't help but chuckle, and then stood aside and watched the two people's bickering. It must be said that these two people, an old man and a young man, who are separated by several generations, get along quite harmoniously. After arguing for a while, Makarov seemed to find that no matter what he said, he couldn't beat Charlotte who was playing tricks, so he simply skipped the topic and began to say what he really wanted to say to Charlotte this time. His face became serious again, and he said, "Charlotte, I am here to announce as the third-generation president of Fairy Tale. From now on, no matter whether you will join Fairy Tale or not, no matter where you are, you will be the best friend of Fairy Tale. No matter what difficulties you encounter, we will give you the greatest assistance. This will be your eternal safe haven and your eternal home. This is my promise to you, as well as that of all members of Fairy Tale." Chapter 86. This is my promise to you, as well as that of all the members of Fairy Tale. Makarov's voice was sonorous and powerful, and his tone was sincere and honest. Combined with his identity, it was hard for people not to be convinced when he said such a thing. Upon hearing this, Charlotte touched his nose. Why did he feel a sour sensation on the tip of his nose? Could it be that he was moved by the words of this old guy? As soon as this idea came to mind, Charlotte forcibly threw it out. He smiled slightly and said, "Old man, even if you are being sentimental with me, what I said just now was still drunken talk, and it will not change because of this. You stinky boy." Makarov went crazy. "Ha! If there is nothing else, I will leave first." Charlotte yawned, waved his hand sleepily, and turned to leave. "I am so sleepy, it seems I am really drunk." Seeing Charlotte leaving, Lysina said to Makarov, "President, we will leave first." Makarov said, "Go ahead, Charlotte is here for the first time in our guild, you should treat this drunk guy well." "Yes, President." Lysina snickered and left with Myra. After the three of them left, Makarov touched his mustache and said, "What an interesting boy." Outside the guild, Lysina and Myra caught up with Charlotte. Lysina looked at Charlotte with a smile, "Brother Charlotte, you are lying again, you are not drunk at all." Charlotte's face was no longer tired, and he looked energetic. He touched Lysina's head and said, "Isn't this just to fool your shameless president? What an old man." Hearing Charlotte teasing their own president like this, Lysina and Myra not only did not blame him, but nodded at the same time, as if they agreed with Charlotte's statement. "By the way, brother Charlotte, didn't you say 2 years ago that you had something important to do? Have you completed it now?" Lysina suddenly asked. Charlotte didn't think about why Lysina suddenly asked this question, and nodded. Although the process was a bit bumpy, it was finally completed. "That's really great." Lysina cheered happily. Seeing Lysina's happy look, Charlotte smiled, without thinking too much, just thinking that the former was concerned about herself and was happy for herself. Myra, who was standing on Charlotte's other side, was very thoughtful. She recalled the scene when she and Charlotte parted 2 years ago, and immediately guessed her sister's little thoughts, but she didn't say much. She just glanced at the boy next to her, and a gentle smile flashed in the corner of her eyes. At this time, the sky had begun to darken, so Myra suggested taking Charlotte to a nearby restaurant with a good reputation for dinner, as a welcome for Charlotte. The party that was held for Charlotte before was automatically ignored by her. In the restaurant, it was still by the window. The three of them ate a sumptuous dinner while chatting about various interesting things. With Lysina, the happy fruit, the atmosphere between the three was always cheerful. When dinner was almost over, Charlotte suddenly asked, "Myra, can you tell me more about the Phantom's attack on your guild this time? What happened?" Myra asked in confusion, not quite understanding why Charlotte suddenly asked this. However, she still honestly told the story of what happened this time. In fact, the matter was not that serious. The Phantom's people launched the attack at night. There was no one in the guild at that time, so only the guild was destroyed, and there were no casualties. If there were casualties, I think the old man wouldn't be so indifferent. Charlotte said. Myra was stunned, and then thought that the old man in Charlotte's mouth should be their president. She nodded while laughing in her heart. If there were casualties, I believe that with the president's protective personality, he would definitely not care about the council. Charlotte, you suddenly ask this, is there anything you want to say? Myra asked. He didn't think that Charlotte would bring this up for no reason. Charlotte narrowed his eyes slightly and said, I just want to say that based on my understanding of the Phantoms, since they have launched an attack on you, they will never give up so easily. You mean, Myra was not stupid either, she understood the meaning of Charlotte's words, the Spectre will have follow-up actions. Charlotte nodded. At this time, Lysina, who had been sitting next to Charlotte and had not spoken, suddenly said, Brother Charlotte, from what you said just now, you seem to be very familiar with the Spectre. Charlotte's mind flashed with a figure he had seen a year ago, and he said, not familiar, I just met their president. Have you met Joseph, the president of the Phantom? Myra asked in surprise. She knew the president of the Phantom ruler. After all, he was a strong man who was one of the 10 holy magicians like her own president. Charlotte nodded and said, I met him once. What did you talk about when you met? Lysina asked curiously. It's nothing. Charlotte took a sip of the juice on the table, glanced at the two girls, and said lightly, he just invited me to join his guild, Phantom Ruler. What? Chapter 87. What? After hearing Charlotte's words, both Myra and Lysina were shocked. Brother Charlotte, you won't join us, will you? Lysina asked hurriedly, her cute little face full of anxiety. Of course not. Charlotte shook his head and said, not to mention that I had no intention of joining a guild at that time. Even if I did, my first choice would definitely be your guild. Myra and Lysina heaved a sigh of relief when they heard this. While Lysina was heaving a sigh of relief, a cunning light flashed in her smart eyes after hearing Charlotte's next words. Charlotte did not notice the change in Lysina's eyes, and continued, that day Joseph suddenly found me and asked me to join his guild, and there was no intention to hide his ambition in his words. He told me directly that his first goal was to make Phantom Ruler the #1 guild in the Kingdom of Fiori, and it was the kind of #1 without any suspense. Charlotte did not say that Joseph suddenly found him and invited him to join his guild. What is the reason? It just makes its ambition clear. #1 without any suspense. Myra murmured softly. She was a very smart girl and soon understood the meaning of Charlotte's words. A little frost appeared in her watery eyes. Is it because our guild is too strong and hinders his ambition? At this moment, Myra, who understood why the Phantom attacked their guild, was very angry. Whether it was Myra or other members of Fairy Tale, there was never the word ambition in their dictionary. Although Makarov often shouted that Fairy Tale was the #1 guild during routine guild meetings, in fact, he didn't care about this false name at all. The only thing he cared about was the cute children in his guild. It was for this reason that Myra felt angry when she thought that the Phantom had launched an inexplicable attack on them for such a reason and destroyed her beloved guild. Moreover, this seemed to be just a prelude. They might launch more attacks in the future, and by then, the target of the attack might not just be an empty guild. Thinking of this, the frost in Myra's eyes became even heavier, and she said coldly, if Joseph thinks that Fairy Tale is a soft persimmon that can be squeezed at will, let him try it. I promise to give him and his men a lesson they will never forget. Myra was no longer as gentle as before. The aura that was faintly rising from her body while she was talking gave Charlotte a feeling that yesterday was reappearing, as if the person in front of him was the arrogant demon Myra Jane from 2 years ago. That's right, Brother Charlotte, don't worry, our Fairy Tale is the most powerful, we are not afraid of them, the ghosts. Lysina also smiled and said. I'm not worried about the strength of your guild. Charlotte said, I'm just reminding you that Joseph is not only powerful, but also a sinister person who will do anything to achieve his goals. You should be careful. Don't worry, Charlotte. No matter how powerful Joseph is, he is only one of the 10 great magicians on par with our president. Even if he comes in person, we won't suffer any loss with the president here. Myra's aura was retracted, and she became gentle and kind again, and said to Charlotte with peace of mind. However, Myra did not notice that although Charlotte talked about Joseph's power, there was no fear in his tone. Obviously, his words were just a reminder to Myra and the others. But in order to prevent any accidents, I think you should not leave the guild for the time being, so as to avoid being left alone and encountering unexpected events. Charlotte said. If I remember correctly, everyone should stay in the guild. I will tell everyone what you said, Charlotte, tomorrow. Myra thought for a moment and said. That's not right, Sister Myra. Lysina shook her head and said, you forgot, didn't Rebecca's Lane Engine team take a mission some time ago, and they haven't come back yet? After hearing Lysina's words, Myra also remembered it, but Rebecca and the others didn't have a rare item like the communication magic crystal, so she couldn't contact them now. Thinking of the characteristics of Joseph mentioned by Charlotte, it seemed that the members under his command would not be much better. For this, she could only pray silently in her heart, hoping that Rebecca and the others could return smoothly and not have any accidents on the way. Next, after the reminder, the three did not continue this topic, but continued to talk about some more cheerful things. It was not until very late that the three left the restaurant. Charlotte did not accept the invitation of the two sisters to live in their dormitory. Although Myra beside him did not reveal any refusal when Lysina invited him, his heart was still a little eager at that time, but after thinking about it, he still chose to refuse, and temporarily stayed in a hotel near the Fairy Tale Guild. The next day. Bang, bang, bang. Early in the morning, there was a loud knock on the door of Charlotte's hotel room. Lysina, what happened? Why are you so anxious? When Charlotte opened the door, he saw Lysina standing at the door with an anxious look on her face. He immediately had an ominous premonition. Brother Charlotte, something bad has happened. Come with me quickly. Lysina said anxiously. After that, without waiting for Charlotte to reply, she pulled Charlotte up and ran outside. Lysina pulled Charlotte until they reached the Nanko Park in the south of Magnolia. At this time, a large crowd of people had gathered around the thick tree in the center of the park, which required 10 people to hug. Many of them were members of Fairy Tale, and everyone's face was full of angry flames. Lysina continued to pull Charlotte, squeezed through the crowd, and walked inside. When Charlotte saw the scene inside, his eyes shrank suddenly, and he sighed in his heart. Sure enough, the thing he least wanted to see happened. Joseph was still the Joseph in his impression. His guild, like him as the president, was equally despicable and shameless, with no bottom line. Chapter 88. On the big tree in the center of the park, 3 figures were tied to the trunk in a horizontal row, completely exposed to the sight of the people around. Levi, Jade, Troy. These 3 people are the drive engine team that Lysina mentioned yesterday who went out on a mission and did not return. On the trunk of the big tree above the 3 people, there is a black emblem engraved. Seeing the black emblem, Charlotte narrowed her eyes slightly and murmured softly, Phantom. Not only Charlotte, most of the Fairy Tale members who saw this emblem recognized the identity of this emblem, and understood that the one who attacked the Lane Engine team was the culprit who destroyed their guild, the Phantom Ruler. At this time, behind everyone, a dull sound of footsteps was heard. The crowd gathered around made way for a path, and a short figure strode over. It was the president of Fairy Tale, Makarov. But at this moment, Makarov was not as calm as he was yesterday. His old face was as gloomy as ink, looking at the 3 children tied to the tree, especially the 3 of them, all covered with various scars. At this moment, these scars seemed to be engraved on his heart, making him feel heartbroken and in great pain. If it was just destroying the guild, I could tolerate it. But now they are actually attacking the children of my guild, I can't tolerate it. Makarov's voice was low, and veins bulged on his old arms. Affected by his emotions, the powerful magic in his body burst out at this moment, and he roared. Let's fight! Behind him, all the members of Fairy Tale burst out with amazing fighting spirit. They have been waiting for this moment since they saw Levi and the other 2 injured. They want revenge. They want to let the Phantoms know that not everyone can hurt the members of Fairy Tale. Then, under the leadership of Makarov, Fairy Tale almost came out in full force. Their goal was the same, which was the location of the Phantom Guild. South Exit Park. Aren't you going with them? Charlotte asked, looking at Myra who did not follow Makarov into battle. With the leadership of the president, the number of people we dispatched this time is enough to deal with the ghosts, and those people are not here, the guild needs someone to stay behind. Myra shook her head and said, because of the injuries of the Lane Engine team, her face was not very good at the moment. Charlotte nodded. He knew that the people Myra was talking about should be the other strongest candidates in the Fairy Tale Guild who were very famous. Sister Myra, let's send Rebecca and the others to the hospital first. Lysina looked at Rebecca and the other two who had been rescued from the tree trunk and said in a low voice. I'll help. Lucy, who also did not participate in the battle with the ghost, stepped forward and helped the wounded Rebby up. Looking at the tragic scars on the latter's body, she was so heartbroken that she almost cried. She had only been in the guild for a short time, and Rebby happened to be one of her best friends during this period. There's no need to go to the hospital, Charlotte said at this time. Myra and the other two turned their eyes to Charlotte, a little confused. How could they not send Libby and the other two to the hospital with their current injuries? Leave it to me. Under the puzzled gazes of the three people, Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly, and he pointed a finger at Rebecca and the other two. A blue light shot out from Charlotte's fingertips, and when it rushed to Rebecca and the other two, it split into three and turned into 3 rays of light, lingering around the 3 people. Then, under the lingering of the 3 rays of light, the injuries on Rebecca and the other two began to gradually disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even in the end, even the damaged clothes on the 3 people were restored to their original state. After a while, Myra and the others were surprised to find that Rebecca and the other two, who were originally covered with scars and extremely miserable, were in a very good state at the moment, especially Rebecca, who was breathing smoothly and had a rosy and shiny complexion. There was no sign of injury at all. Whether it was Myra, Lysina, or Lucy, the 3 of them had witnessed Charlotte's extraordinary methods, but even so, they were still amazed to see the scene. This method did not look like healing magic, but it was completely better than those healing methods in the hospital. At this time, Libby, who was supported by Lucy, moved her eyelashes slightly, then her eyes suddenly opened and she murmured. When she opened her eyes, Libby was still a little confused. Seeing Lucy supporting her, she subconsciously called out, Lu-chan. Libby, you're awake. Lucy looked at Libby in surprise, and thought to herself, Charlotte's method was too efficient. At the same time, Jed and Troy woke up one after another. Lu-chan, how did we get here? I clearly remember that we were attacked by a ghost, were seriously injured, and then passed out. What's going on now? Libby looked at her body, then looked at the situation of her 2 teammates, and said in confusion. Libby, it was Charlotte who saved you. Before Lucy could speak, Myra on the side took the lead in explaining. Charlotte. Following Myra's gaze, Levi also saw Charlotte standing on the other side. Looking at this strange but handsome man, Levi's eyes flashed with a strange light, and then her face turned slightly red. Then she stepped forward and stretched out her hand, thanking Charlotte, although I don't know who you are, thank you for saving me. I am Levi from Fairy Tale. It's just a piece of cake. My name is Charlotte. Charlotte stretched out his hand and shook hands with Rebecca lightly, saying lightly. Although the power of time reversal is much more difficult to use on others than on oneself, neither Rebecca nor the other members of the Lane Engine team have strong magic power, so with Charlotte's current mastery of the power of time, he can do this easily. Just like he said, it's just a piece of cake. Then, the other 2 people in the Lane Engine team hurriedly came forward to thank Charlotte and introduced themselves. Charlotte nodded to both of them. As for their names, he had just reported them once, so there was no need to say more. Chapter 89. Northeast of Fiori Kingdom, Oak. This is the headquarters of the Wizard Guild Phantom Ruler. Bang! With a loud bang, the Phantom Ruler's door was directly smashed open by a violent force, instantly scaring the Phantom Ruler members in the guild, and they all turned their eyes over. I saw a group of Fairy Tale members led by Makarov standing at the door with a fierce look. When they saw the Phantom Ruler members in the guild, everyone's eyes flashed with murderous intent. It's Fairy Tale. Looking at the group of people at the door who were obviously looking for trouble, soon some Spectre members recognized the emblems on their bodies and shouted. Although most of them were ordinary members of Spectre, they all knew what the top leaders of their guild had done to Fairy Tale in the past 2 days. Their 2 guilds are now at loggerheads. So after knowing the identities of this group of people, they all showed fierce gleams on their faces and bared their teeth. But before they could make any move, they saw the front of the crowd of Fairy Tale. The young man with cherry blossom hair suddenly bulged his mouth, and the next moment, hot flames spewed out of his mouth. Several members of Spectre were not careful and were immediately drowned in the flames, and miserable screams rang out wildly. With Natsu's move, the others, needless to say, all cast magic. ice, bullets, cards, swords. Endless magics all rushed towards the members of Spectre. Fortunately, after experiencing Natsu's angry flames just now, they all reacted. When the fairy tale people attacked, they also began to cast magic. However, since they were just ordinary members of Spectre, it meant that they did not master any powerful magic. Facing the main forces of fairy tale such as Natsu, Grey, and Urza, their magic seemed a little vulnerable, so for a while the situation was directly one-sided. Fortunately, at this time, the top leaders of Spectre appeared and the situation changed. Joseph should be up there, I'm going to settle accounts with him. Makarov cast the giant magic, and the whole person changed from a dwarf to a giant several feet tall. He looked up at the top of the guild, and said something to Urza and the others not far away in a buzzing voice, and then he was wrapped in strong magic power and rushed up. As the saying goes, soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals, and kings against kings, the battle between the angry fairy tale and the provocative phantom was about to break out. However, no one in fairy tale noticed that when Makarov rushed to the top of the guild, Gajil, the vice president of the phantom, who was fighting with Natsu, had a sinister light flashing in his eyes. Compared to the fierce battle taking place in the Phantom Ruler Guild, the fairy tale at this time was in a rare tranquility. Of course, this was also because most of the fairy tale members followed Makarov to fight the phantoms, and only a few people such as Myra stayed in the guild. Without the noisiest guys led by Natsu on weekdays, it was naturally quiet. Lucy, who had just said goodbye to Myra and the others, walked alone on the street near the river. Her delicate face was not smiling as usual, but looked a little melancholy. I wonder how the president and the others are doing now. Lucy muttered as she walked with her head down. According to what Miss Myra said, with the president here, and Urza, Natsu, Grey and the others, we should definitely win. I hope no one gets hurt. Thinking about something, Lucy suddenly raised her head, then was slightly stunned, looking at a figure in front of her, and blinked. Charlotte. A slender figure was seen facing the direction of the river, and the breeze gently blew his hair. Although the whole face could not be seen, the angular and flawless profile still made Lucy recognize him at a glance. Lucy walked up slowly and said softly, Charlotte, why are you here, weren't you there just now? The man turned around, and the handsome face was Charlotte. He looked at Lucy in front of him and said lightly, I'm waiting for you. Wait for me? What are you waiting for? Lucy asked in confusion. Now is an extraordinary period. It is very dangerous for you to go home alone. In order to prevent what happened to Rebbe and the others from happening again, I think it is better to keep an eye on you. Charlotte said. Hearing Charlotte's words, Lucy suddenly felt warm in her heart, but she shook her head and said to Charlotte, but I think Miss Myra and the others need you more, and Rebbe, she has been hurt once, and can't be hurt a second time, so, Charlotte, you go and protect them, don't worry, I can protect myself, I am also very strong now. As she said, Lucy reached out and took off the string of star keys on her waist, and smiled playfully at Charlotte, look, I am a star wizard with 5 golden keys, I can definitely protect myself. No matter how many golden keys there are, it is useless if the wizard is too weak. Charlotte just glanced at Lucy and said calmly. Lucy was so embarrassed that her hand, which was shaking the celestial key, became stiff. You don't have to be so blunt. Charlotte continued, besides, Myra is there, so it doesn't matter if I'm there or not. Unless the Ghost Guild leader takes action personally, no one can hurt others in front of Myra. Miss Myra. Lucy put the key back on her waist and a big question mark popped up in her head when she heard Charlotte's words. I remember I told you that Fairy Tale has more than one S-class female wizard, Urza. As soon as Charlotte said this, Lucy's eyes widened, she pulled the corners of her mouth, looked at Charlotte, and said in a difficult tone, you mean, the other S-class female wizard is Miss Myra, right? Charlotte's eyes moved slightly, and she looked at Lucy. The corners of her lips slightly raised a small arc, and she spoke slowly. Why, doesn't it look like that? Chapter 90. What, don't you look like her? Listening to Charlotte's serious tone, Lucy couldn't help but smile bitterly. Myra's pure and gentle appearance, watery eyes and gentle smile appeared in her mind. No matter which aspect, Myra presented to Lucy, she was a completely elegant lady. In her eyes, Myra was a perfect goddess that would amaze girls at first sight, not to mention boys. I don't know how many innocent boys turned into perverts after seeing Myra's photo in Magic Weekly. But now Charlotte told her that such a perfect goddess actually possessed the terrifying strength of S-level. How could other female magicians survive? Her eyelids twitched fiercely a few times. She wanted to tell Charlotte directly that it was not like that, but when she saw a hint of mockery in Charlotte's eyes, she knew that the latter must have been ready to laugh at her a long time ago, so she pulled the corners of her mouth and forced out a few words in a stiff tone. They look alike, so alike. But when Charlotte heard this, he changed the subject and said playfully, but I don't think they look alike at all. Lucy felt her whole body stiff, as if she was petrified. She was fooled by Charlotte again. Seeing Lucy's petrified look, Charlotte's lips curved up a little, with a smile on his face, and turned around, let's go. After Lucy came to her senses, she wrinkled her small nose, then stretched out her hands, clenched her fists, looked at Charlotte's back, and punched a few times through the air, humming and whispering something. After venting her anger, Lucy trotted to catch up with Charlotte and asked, "Where are you going? Are you going to my house? I remember someone said that after I come to Fairy Tale, they will treat me well. I think now is a good time." Charlotte kept walking and talking to himself, but when he said this, his tone was paused, and then he continued, "Of course, if you go to your house to treat me, I have no objection." This. Lucy, who was walking behind Charlotte, was slightly stunned. Of course she knew that the someone Charlotte was talking about was her, because that was what she said to Charlotte when Charlotte stated that she was coming to Fairy Tale. However, at that time, she didn't know that Charlotte actually knew Myra from their guild, especially Lysina even called him brother, which showed how good their relationship was. In fact, Lucy's original plan was to take Charlotte to experience the customs and culture of Magnolia that day. Although she herself was not very familiar with this place, in her opinion, she should be more familiar with it than Charlotte, a foreigner. But with Myra, the top beauty of the guild, there was no need for Charlotte, a newcomer to the guild, to entertain her, so she didn't mention it again at that time, and directly killed her original idea in her heart. But she didn't expect Charlotte to bring up this matter at this time. She originally thought that Charlotte had forgotten about it. "Hey, I think you are not going to go back on your word." Feeling the hesitation of the girl behind him, Charlotte stopped, turned around and looked at her playfully and said, I won't go back on my word, I'll treat you." Being provoked by Charlotte so simply, Lucy snorted and stared at the former and said loudly, but after she finished speaking, she immediately pursed her lips again, and then said weakly, "But, don't blame me if the hospitality is not good enough. That depends on your attitude at that time." Charlotte smiled faintly and said. As soon as Charlotte finished speaking, rain began to fall from the sky, and in an instant the rain became heavy, hitting the ground with a series of clapping sounds. "No way, sun shower." Lucy put her hand on her forehead, looked up at the clear sky without a single cloud, and the bright sun hanging high in the sky, and couldn't help complaining. "The rain is getting heavier, Charlotte, let's go to my house, it's just around the corner." Although the rain only lasted for a while, Lucy was already soaked all over. She hurriedly stepped forward and took Charlotte's hand, wanting to take her back to her home not far away. But after she took a step, she found that no matter how hard she tried, Charlotte seemed to be welded to the ground and could not be pulled. She turned around and looked at Charlotte in confusion. "Nanny." When she turned around, her eyes were bulging out of their sockets in shock. The rain kept falling, but every time the bean-sized raindrops were about to fall on Charlotte, they seemed to disappear out of thin air, leaving no trace of the rain on Charlotte's body. "Charlotte, why do you?" Just as Lucy was about to ask Charlotte what was going on, she noticed that Charlotte was looking to the left. Seeing this, Lucy also turned around and looked in that direction. There were light footsteps mixed in the rain. Through the heavy rain, Lucy could vaguely see a figure holding an umbrella walking towards them. When the figure came close to them, Lucy could see her clearly. It was a pretty girl wearing a blue coat and with blue curly hair. The girl was holding an umbrella, and her bright eyes looked at Charlotte with a little curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, as if she was thinking about something. After a while, it seemed that her thoughts were fruitless. She stretched out the hand without the umbrella, pointed her white finger at Charlotte, and said, "I am Juvia the Rain Girl. Can you tell Juvia why the rain didn't fall on you?" Chapter 91. I am Juvia the Rain Girl. Can you tell Juvia why the rain didn't fall on you? Juvia the Rain Girl. After hearing Juvia's words and feeling the water attribute in her body, Charlotte had roughly guessed her identity. Because I don't want the rain to get on me. Charlotte replied. Juvia frowned when she heard that. Because Charlotte's words did not completely answer her question, she still didn't know why the rain didn't get on Charlotte. Charlotte stretched out a hand with his palm facing the sky. His situation of not being wet with rain suddenly changed. The falling raindrops began to hit his palm continuously. Charlotte looked at Juvia and said, "This rain is caused by you." Yes, Juvia is the rain girl. Wherever Juvia is, it will rain. It can be seen that this girl named Juvia is very simple-minded. Facing the question from Charlotte, a stranger, she directly told her situation without reservation. Compared with Charlotte, who did not change her expression at all when she heard this, Lucy standing next to Charlotte was very surprised. This sudden heavy rain was actually related to this pretty girl. It rains wherever she appears. This girl is too strange. Juvia is a disgusting person. Juvia's eyes drooped slightly when she said this, and she obviously didn't like the situation she was in. But Charlotte's next words made her eyes lift up again. What an enviable physique. Feeling the extremely rich water-attributed aura in Juvia's body, Charlotte said something inexplicable. Juvia blinked her eyes. Although she didn't understand what Charlotte meant, she didn't hear the disgusting tone in Charlotte's words. She said in a daze, Don't you hate Juvia?" Charlotte heard this and shook her head gently. Seeing this, Juvia fell into silence. After a moment, she looked at Charlotte and said softly, "Thank you, Juvia is very happy. But Juvia still has a mission to complete, so she can't continue chatting with you here." Juvia seemed to have struggled for a long time before she turned around and walked towards an alley with her umbrella. No. At the moment when Juvia turned around, a sound with a strange beat came from the rain. Then a guy wearing a grey suit, a monocle and a long face appeared in Charlotte's sight. Another strange person has appeared. "Lucy!" exclaimed. Whether it was the way this person appeared or his strange appearance, Lucy felt that he was as strange as Juvia just now. Of course, Juvia's strangeness was not in her appearance, but in the fact that she was accompanied by rain whenever she went out. "Lady Juvia, the target is right in front of you, you can't just leave like this." As soon as this person appeared, he came to Juvia's side. It was obvious that the two knew each other. "Target." Hearing this word, Juvia stopped her steps and turned back to Charlotte. However, this time her eyes were not on Charlotte, but on Lucy beside her. Because their target this time was a girl. "My whispering glasses tell me that this lady is the one we are looking for this time." "They?" Man in the grey suit said, touching his monocle. "Hey, I'm the target." Lucy pointed at herself, looking confused. "Excuse me, let me introduce myself first. My name is Soul, but I usually prefer others to call me Gentleman Soul." The man in the grey suit made a gentlemanly gesture and introduced himself, but his long face made it impossible for him to be associated with the word gentleman. "But I don't even know you guys." After listening to this person's introduction, Lucy was still confused. Earth Thor, Rain Girl Juvia, they are two of the four elements of the Phantom. Charlotte's calm voice sounded. Lucy was shocked when she heard it. The four elements of the Phantom. The Phantom, isn't it? You are the ones who hurt Libby. Lucy looked at the two of them angrily. No. Let me clear up this misunderstanding. Thor beat the strange rhythm again and said, "Whether it is the destruction of your guild or the harm to that person named Levi, it was done by Lord Gajiel and has nothing to do with us. In fact, we don't know what the real purpose of the guild is. We are just carrying out the mission of the president and taking you back." Earth Thor, one of the four elements, has been clearly targeting Lucy since he appeared. He didn't even look at Charlotte. Especially what he said made Charlotte a little curious. The reason why Rebecca and the others were attacked before was that they were alone and the Phantom took the opportunity to provoke the anger of the fairies. But this time, when Makarov led most of the fairy tale members to go to find the Phantom to start a war, the Phantom actually sent 2 members of the 4 elements to Magnolia where the fairy tale guild was located to carry out the mission assigned by Joseph, with a clear goal. And this target is Lucy. Charlotte doesn't think that Joseph would be so bored as to send 2 members of the 4 elements just to capture a newcomer to fairy tale. There must be something he doesn't know. Now that the target has been found, let's bring her back to the guild. Juvia looked at Lucy and said lightly. Sorry. Charlotte crossed and stood directly in front of Lucy, looking directly at the two ghosts, and said with a smile, "It's impossible for you to take people away, and even you two have to stay together." Chapter 92. Charlotte. Looking at the broad back standing in front of her, Lucy felt a strong sense of security in her heart. Even though she knew that the four elements of the ghost were wizards who were many times stronger than herself, she was not afraid at all. "Juvia doesn't want to hurt you." Juvia looked at Charlotte, who was standing in front of Lucy, and said softly. "Really? Actually, I don't want to hurt you either." Charlotte smiled faintly and said. "Then please get out of the way, our target is only Lucy Heartfilia." Juvia continued. As soon as she said this, both Charlotte and Lucy standing behind Charlotte showed some subtle changes on their faces. "Heartfilia," Charlotte muttered in her heart. Charlotte was not familiar with this surname, but she was not unfamiliar with it. Heartfilia was a super tycoon in the kingdom of Fiori. It could be said that the family was extremely wealthy and rich enough to rival a country. Charlotte did not expect that this girl, who was usually carefree and liked to laugh heartily when encountering happy things, would actually be the daughter of the Heartfilia tycoon. Her independent and strong character was very different from some of the daughters in Charlotte's impression. At the same time, Lucy, who was standing behind Charlotte, had her eyes shaking when she heard Juvia say her last name, especially when she thought that Charlotte was here too. She was afraid that Charlotte would think that she had been deceiving him, and her heart became uneasy. At this time, Charlotte's thoughts were naturally not as complicated as Lucy's. He did not think much about this issue at all, but looked at Juvia and said, "I have already said that you can't take the person away. Do it, and remember that you only have one chance." Juvia frowned slightly when she heard that, and she said to Thor beside her, "Juvia, stop him, and you take the target away." "Lord Juvia, the great gentleman Thor knows what to do," Thor said as he shook his body randomly. "Juvia will not hurt you, water restraint." As Juvia spoke, the extremely rich water attribute magic in her body was mobilized. She raised her jade hand, and thick water vapor appeared out of thin air beside Charlotte. The water vapor quickly formed a water flow, rolled in an arc in the air, and wrapped Charlotte in it. At the same time, Thor beside her also had earth attribute magic emerging from his body. Dance of the sand. A thick layer of dust rose strangely from the rain. Charlotte. When the smoke and dust rose up, Lucy's vision became blurred. She couldn't even see Charlotte standing in front of her. She shouted anxiously. She just saw Charlotte being wrapped by the water. Bang! At this moment, Lucy's ears moved slightly. Under the influence of the smoke and dust, although she couldn't see clearly, she clearly heard a bang sound coming from a position very close to her, accompanied by a scream. Then, she vaguely saw a blue light flash in the smoke and dust, and then she saw the smoke and dust dissipate, and she could see everything around her again. Charlotte. She saw Charlotte in front of her at a glance. Charlotte at this time was not wrapped in the water as she had seen before. Not only that, she also saw that not far ahead, on a thick wall, a figure seemed to be embedded in it. Although the whole person looked embarrassed, Lucy still recognized him easily. It was the Thor who always claimed to be a gentleman. This Earth Thor obviously couldn't have embedded himself in the wall. Lucy looked at Charlotte again, blinking her eyes slightly, as if she knew the answer. How could it be that Juvia's water restraints were ineffective? Juvia opened her mouth slightly, looking at Charlotte in front of her, as if she couldn't believe it. "You have no chance anymore," Charlotte said lightly, and then he looked up at the sky, where there were still bean-sized raindrops falling slowly. He whispered, "This rain, disappear too." After that, he waved his hand suddenly. Then he saw that all the raindrops that were originally falling went upstream and returned to the sky. Even the rain that had fallen to the ground and merged into streams, all flowed back and turned into raindrops and returned to the sky. This scene happened in just a moment. Before Lucy and Juvia could react, the rain curtain in the sky disappeared, and the sky became clear again. The rain disappeared. Juvia covered her mouth lightly, watching the scene in disbelief. From childhood to adulthood, wherever she appeared, there would be heavy rain, and it had never changed. But now, someone actually made the heavy rain that always accompanied her disappear. At this time, Thor, who was embedded in the wall, trembled slightly, and then with a bang, the whole wall broke apart, and Thor's body naturally fell off from it. Thor, who was in a mess, stood up and looked at Charlotte angrily. After casting the magic sand dance, he directly planned to secretly take Lucy Hartfilia away, but this person suddenly appeared in front of him, and then kicked him hard with a kick. The huge force made him smash into the wall. What made him most incredible was that he clearly saw this person being bound by Juvia's water flow restraint. How could he appear in front of him? As a four-element, Juvia's ability was very clear to him. But the current situation did not allow him to think so much. He couldn't even maintain his gentlemanly image now. The magic power in his body surged wildly, and he shouted at Charlotte, "Rock concerto!" However, before his magic was fully unleashed, Charlotte's body blurred and disappeared from the spot. In an instant, he appeared in front of him. Before he could understand what was going on, Charlotte suddenly raised his long legs and kicked him hard from top to bottom. With this kick, Thor fell to the ground with a bang. The monocle on his left eye broke in two. His eyes rolled back and he fainted completely. Even the street ground under him cracked. But in the next moment, a blue light suddenly appeared in the crack, and then it healed again. Beating people is beating people, but the street cannot be destroyed. Charlotte said that he still has principles. After killing Thor with one kick, Charlotte picked him up with one hand, then walked to Juvia and said lightly, "How about it, do you still want to fight?" Juvia was still staring blankly at the beautiful sky that she had never appreciated before. After hearing Charlotte's words, she was shocked and retracted her gaze. Seeing Charlotte holding her partner in one hand, she felt an inexplicable emotion in her heart, and then her face turned slightly red. She whispered, "Juvia is not your opponent. Since you know you are no match for me, just be obedient, or I will spank you." Charlotte's words made Juvia's face even redder, and her two hands subconsciously moved to her buttocks. She lowered her head and said in a mosquito-like voice, "Juvia knows." Then, Charlotte turned around and looked at Lucy, who was still a little confused at this time, and said with a little playfulness, "Let's go, to your house." Lucy, Hartfilia. Chapter 93. Magnolia. With Lucy leading the way, Charlotte carried Thor in one hand, followed by Juvia who had become very well behaved along the way, and soon arrived at Lucy's rented apartment. "Is this where you live?" "Not bad." Looking around the living room, Charlotte made a simple evaluation. At the same time, he threw Thor, who was in his hand, to the corner of the living room, and then took a big step and sat on the sofa without any hesitation. Juvia stood aside honestly, but behind this honesty, her eyes would occasionally glance at Charlotte. Opposite Charlotte, Lucy stood wet all over, with a somewhat embarrassed expression, and even more uneasy in her heart. In this situation, it was as if Charlotte was the owner of this apartment. "Lucy, if you have anything to say, just say it directly. It's uncomfortable to hold it in." Charlotte looked at Lucy who was very embarrassed and said, "Charlotte, I'm sorry, Lucy." Lowered her head slightly and whispered, "Sorry? Sorry for what?" "That is, I shouldn't have concealed my identity and lied to you, as." She spoke, Lucy lowered her head a little more. "Apologize just because of this." I'm sorry, but I don't accept your apology." Charlotte put her hands on the back of the sofa, making herself sit in the most comfortable position, and said lightly. Hearing Charlotte's words, Lucy's body trembled slightly. And then she fell into silence. Not long after, there was a clear sound of water dripping onto the floor in the living room, accompanied by a faint sob from a girl. These were not ordinary drops of water, but tears. Lucy was crying. Seeing this scene, Charlotte rubbed his brows gently and smiled bitterly in his heart. If he had known, he would not have teased her. Now she is crying. Are women really made of water? Thinking of this, his eyes could not help but glance at Juvia beside him. He didn't know about other women, but this woman was definitely made of water. Just at this moment, Juvia couldn't help but steal a glance at Charlotte, and then their eyes collided in the air. Juvia, who had not expected that Charlotte was also looking at her, was slightly stunned when Charlotte's eyes met. Then, she quickly retracted her peeking eyes, stood up straight, and looked straight ahead, just like a child who was caught stealing snacks. Ignoring Juvia's little movements, Charlotte turned his gaze back to Lucy who was crying, and said with a bitter smile in his heart, Lucy, I have a question for you. Varied, what is the problem? Hearing Charlotte's words, Lucy still didn't raise her head, but said with a choked voice. Do you know my previous identity? Charlotte asked. No. I know. Lucy replied with her head down. Upon hearing this, Charlotte chuckled and said slowly, then according to what you said just now, did I also hide my identity from you? I should also apologize to you. As soon as the voice fell, Lucy finally raised her head which had been buried in her chest, and looked at Charlotte with red eyes. There were still a few crystal tears in her eyes, and she looked pitiful. After hearing what Charlotte said, she slowly came to her senses. It turned out that Charlotte's words that he did not accept her apology were just a joke. He did not refuse his apology, but he thought that he did not need to apologize at all. After understanding it, Lucy was moved, but she could not help but complain to Charlotte. Couldn't he just say it directly? He had to tease her. Just now, when she heard Charlotte say that he did not accept her apology, she was really about to die. She felt that the whole world had become grey. Damn Charlotte! Lucy muttered to herself, wiped the tears from her eyes, and suddenly burst into laughter. It seems that you have figured it out. Seeing that Lucy's face was smiling again, Charlotte continued, in fact, everyone has their own secrets in their hearts. Even between close friends, there are things that the other party doesn't know. But this is not called deception, it's just human nature. Not only you, but also me, and everyone in fairy tale, are like this, so you don't need to blame yourself at all, let alone apologize. Thank you, Charlotte. Charlotte's words calmed Lucy's previous anxiety and made her feel relaxed. However, after thinking about it, she said with a firm look in her eyes, Charlotte, if you want to listen to me, my secret. Charlotte didn't expect Lucy to say that. He smiled and said, if you want to tell me, I'm willing to listen. But, at this point, Charlotte changed the subject and said, before you tell me your secret, should we do something first? What? Lucy was confused. I say, don't you feel cold from just now until now? Charlotte glanced at Lucy's body and said with a teasing smile, or are you doing this on purpose to entertain me with yourself? When Charlotte's eyes swept over her, Lucy felt something was wrong. Now hearing Charlotte's words, she immediately lowered her head and immediately realized her embarrassment. Her delicate cheeks turned red with shame. You wish? Lucy cried out, and rushed to the bathroom. When she heard Charlotte's hearty laughter outside the bathroom, Lucy's face became even more rosy, and even her fair skin, which had just been exposed to the air after taking off her clothes, was quietly stained with a layer of charming pink. Chapter 94. Hwalala. In the bathroom, the water was running. Although Charlotte knew clearly that there was a beautiful blonde bathing in the bathroom, she was still determined and unmoved, at least on the surface. Charlotte's expression was no longer the teasing expression when she teased Lucy just now, but became extremely cold. She turned to look at Juvia and said, come here. Oh. Juvia responded softly and walked in front of Charlotte obediently. I want to know why Joseph sent you to catch Lucy. Charlotte asked. Juvia doesn't know. Juvia shook her head and answered honestly, the president just asked us to bring Lucy Hartfilia back intact, and didn't say anything else. While Juvia was talking, Charlotte's eyes flickered with a faint light, staring at Juvia's eyes. Under Charlotte's gaze, Juvia always felt a little uncomfortable, as if her heart was completely seen through by Charlotte, but she did not move away, but finished speaking under this strange feeling. Looking at Juvia's clear and pure eyes, Charlotte knew that every word she said just now was true. The light in Charlotte's eyes slowly dissipated, and at the same time Juvia also found that the uncomfortable feeling in her body disappeared. Charlotte pondered for a moment, and his eyes suddenly turned and fell on Thor, who was thrown into the corner by him. A blue light flashed in his eyes, and Thor, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, suddenly let out a scream and bounced up from the ground. Thor, who was forcibly awakened by Charlotte, had not yet made any other movements, but his body suddenly tensed up, and a feeling of being on edge rose from the bottom of his heart. He turned around stiffly and met Charlotte's emotionless eyes. It was like the eyes of hell. Being stared at by them, the fear deep in Thor's heart surged out like a tide. Thinking of Charlotte's ghostly strength that had killed him in an instant, he swallowed his saliva subconsciously, and his legs began to tremble. He did not have the aura of a four elements when he first met her. Tell me why you came to arrest Lucy, otherwise, Charlotte said in a cold tone, I think you should know what the ending will be for a worthless person. I have no idea, no, I know. As soon as Thor's words came out, he felt a sharp murderous intent falling on him, and quickly changed his words. Cold sweat continued to flow on his forehead, and he said in a trembling voice, "I know that the President personally received a commission some time ago, and the President attached great importance to that commission. I accidentally heard the President mention that the client seemed to be called Jude Hartfilia. That's all I know." After listening to what Thor said, Charlotte paused for a moment. He didn't care how Thor heard the news from Joseph. What he cared about was the name Thor mentioned. Jude Hartfilia. This name was the name of the head of the Hartfilia Chable, Lucy's father. Did the father commission someone to arrest his daughter? Charlotte sneered in his heart. In the past 2 years, he has traveled to many places and met many big figures from big families. Charlotte has always been disgusted with these people, because many of them who have huge wealth or huge power look at family affection very coldly, which is what Charlotte doesn't like. In Charlotte's opinion, Lucy's father is probably similar to those people, but thinking that in such a family environment, Lucy's character is not influenced by the coldness, but like an ordinary girl. It is very rare. Thinking of this, Charlotte couldn't help but look up to this independent girl again. "Your information is still useful, so I'll spare your life for now," Charlotte said coldly, looking at Thor who was standing in the corner trembling with fear. Thor was relieved when he heard this. Just now, when he felt the cold murderous intent, he really felt that he was going to die. He had no doubt that if he couldn't show his value as Charlotte said, this person would really kill him. Charlotte looked coldly at Thor, whose expression was obviously relaxed. The blue light flashed in his eyes again. The latter screamed again and fainted. Charlotte leaned on the soft sofa, feeling a little distressed. He didn't know how to tell Lucy the news. Her own father commissioned someone to arrest her. This news was really cruel for a girl. That. At this moment, a low murmur came into Charlotte's ear. Charlotte looked up and saw Juvia looking at her with a frown on her face. Charlotte asked, "What did you just say?" Juvia lowered her head and whispered, "Juvia is a worthless person." "Hey!" Charlotte was stunned for a moment, then she understood. It seemed that what she had just said to Thor had made the little girl think too much. "You just need to be obedient, and you will be valuable sooner or later, understand?" Charlotte said to her. His attitude towards Juvia and Thor was completely different, of course, not because she was sympathetic to women, but because this girl did not show hostility to him when she knew that he was in the same group as her target Lucy. On the contrary, she still did not want to hurt herself when she knew that he was going to attack her. This was the reason why Charlotte treated her differently, not because she was a girl, even though she was extremely outstanding in both appearance and figure. Juvia understood, Juvia will definitely be obedient in the future. After hearing what Charlotte said, Juvia's eyes were watery and she was deeply moved. This pure girl. Click. At this moment, a door opened and the sound came from the direction of the bathroom. Chapter 95. In the living room. Charlotte sat on the sofa, looking at the half-open door, stroking his chin, and said to Juvia, "You stay here." "Yet." Juvia nodded obediently like a chick pecking at rice. Then Charlotte stood up from the sofa, walked to the door, pushed it open and closed it. After Charlotte entered the room, Juvia was the only sober person in the living room except for the unconscious Thor. Her clear eyes stared at the door, and her mind began to fantasize involuntarily. As she thought more and more, her cheeks became redder and hotter, obviously thinking of some strange things. At the same time, after Charlotte stepped into the room, he stopped at the door. In his sight, a piece of white came into his eyes. In front of the closet, Lucy turned her back to Charlotte, and her hands kept rummaging in the closet. But her current condition made Charlotte's sight freeze. The bathrobe she was wearing was casually pulled aside, and she was only wearing a sky blue panties. Even the majestic upper body was not bound by anything. Her smooth and tender back was completely exposed to Charlotte's eyes, which was very pleasing to the eye. The only thing that made Charlotte feel a little regretful was that because she was facing away, she could not appreciate the more beautiful scenery in front. At this moment, Lucy, who was rummaging for clothes, seemed to hear the sound of the door closing, and turned around subconsciously. At this moment, Charlotte narrowed her eyes slightly, and a ray of light flashed between her eyes. Now, the last regret was made up. "Charlotte, ah!" Seeing Charlotte standing at the door of her room, Lucy was stunned at first, then she immediately remembered her current situation and screamed, covering her breasts with one hand, reaching into the closet with the other hand to take out a set of clothes at random, then bursting out with unprecedented speed to the big bed beside her, picked up the quilt and wrapped herself tightly, leaving only her head exposed, with a panicked expression and a blushing face. She stretched out a bare arm from the quilt, pointed at Charlotte, and said angrily, why did you just come in without saying a word? Don't you know that you can't enter a girl's bedroom without permission? How do I know that it takes you so long to change clothes? While speaking, Charlotte's eyes stayed on Lucy's quilt, as if his eyes could see through the quilt and see the scenery inside. Do I take a long time to change clothes? Hearing this, Lucy also felt that she took a little longer to change clothes this time than before. In the past, she was more casual about her clothes, but this time, for some reason, she was entangled for a long time when choosing clothes, it's a bit like the state of girls changing clothes before going on a date with their favorite boys. After noticing Charlotte's strange gaze, Lucy blushed even more and tightened the quilt around her. But thinking of what Charlotte had said before, a strange idea popped up in her mind. He doesn't really want me to entertain him with my body. If this is really the case, what should I do? Should I agree to him? He is so handsome and strong, just like a prince in a fairy tale, but shouldn't a girl be more reserved? If I refuse, will he be sad and ignore me in the future? It was as if two villains appeared in Lucy's heart, and they began to argue about this issue, trying to suppress each other. However, as the argument became more intense, it seemed that the villain who said he would agree began to gradually gain the upper hand, and gradually even completely crushed the other villain, leaving him speechless. As the inner world's argument came to an end, Lucy's already blushing face turned even redder, and her cheeks became so hot that they were almost smoking. Seeing this scene, Charlotte's eyes became strange, and she said, "Are you okay?" "Ah." Charlotte's voice suddenly brought Lucy, who was immersed in her inner world, back to her senses. At the moment she came back to her senses, she glanced at Charlotte, and there was a flash of shame in her eyes. Obviously, the final answer of the two villains in her inner world had completely appeared. But Charlotte had no idea that at this time he only needed to hook his hands, and he would be able to have an indescribable thing with the outstanding blonde beauty in front of him, and it was completely voluntary. It's a pity that Charlotte, who did not use the eye of time, did not have the ability to see through the blonde beauty's heart, so he could only miss this great opportunity without knowing what was going on. However, even if Charlotte knew, he probably wouldn't care too much. After all, for him, there would be many such opportunities in the future. Even if there was no opportunity, he could create opportunities at any time as long as he wanted. Charlotte looked at Lucy, who was shy and dared not look at him, and said lightly, "Come on." "Come, what to do, Lucy?" stuttered as she spoke. As she spoke, her hands, whether they were outside or inside the quilt, could not help but tightly grasp the quilt, revealing her nervousness. After all, it was her first time. Charlotte didn't know that Lucy had completely misunderstood at this time, and he said as a matter of course, "Come and tell me your secret, didn't you tell it yourself?" Is this why you came in?" Hearing Charlotte's words, Lucy was slightly stunned, and her expression seemed to be quite surprised. "Otherwise, what do you think I came here for, looking?" At Lucy's strange expression, Charlotte's expression was a little subtle. He was sure that Lucy must have thought of other things just now. Could it be that this girl was talking to me? Without, nothing. Lucy's nervousness disappeared all of a sudden, but her tone seemed to carry a little disappointment, which made Charlotte even more curious about what this girl was thinking just now. Can you please turn around?" Lucy whispered. "Why are you turning around?" You need to put on your clothes. Turn around quickly." Lucy said shyly. "Can't you wear it under the quilt?" "I can't see it." Charlotte teased. "No way." Lucy gritted her teeth. "This guy is so infuriating." Tisk. "You saw it just now, why are you shy?" Seeing Lucy's embarrassed look, Charlotte had to curl her lips and turn away, but on the way back, Charlotte muttered something in a low voice, but even though it was a low voice, it was just enough for Lucy on the bed to hear, as if she did it on purpose. "This guy." Lucy's face flushed pink again. She reached both her hands into the quilt, and then she heard a rustling sound coming from the quilt. This was the first time Lucy put on clothes in front of a boy, and that included underwear. Although Charlotte turned away and she was still covered with a quilt, the process still made her very shy. Lucy even felt that all the shyness in her life seemed to be caused by the boy in front of her, and it seemed that it was not just shyness. Many emotions that had never appeared in her before began to gradually appear in her heart after she met this boy. Could it be that this guy is my nemesis in this life? Chapter 96. Okay, you can turn around now. Hearing this voice that she had been waiting for a long time, Charlotte couldn't help but roll her eyes. Is it really that troublesome to put on clothes? When he turned around, he saw Lucy had already put on her clothes and was sitting upright on the bed, with her hands flat on her sky blue skirt. Although there was still a hint of red on her cheeks, she looked much better than before. Now that the clothes are on, we can talk now. Charlotte walked forward and sat down next to Lucy without hesitation. Because Lucy had just finished taking a shower, he could still smell the fragrance of shower gel coming from the girl next to him. What does clothes are on, we can talk now mean? Hearing Charlotte's words, Lucy couldn't help but complain in her heart. Although she thought carefully that there was nothing wrong with Charlotte's words, it just gave her a feeling of ambiguity. It was really too. Lucy was even more depressed when she saw Charlotte treating this place as her own home. Have we become so familiar with each other? But when she thought about this guy's behavior carefully, he not only came in and out of her boudoir at will, but now he sat on her bed casually. Isn't this kind of behavior only seen between two close friends? Moreover, Charlotte just took her, see all. Thinking of this, Lucy suddenly realized that she and Charlotte had become so familiar with each other that she herself had not even noticed. When she thought of Charlotte's series of behaviors that were considered excessive, she did not feel any disgust or anger in her heart. After all, before, she even reluctantly accepted the offer of her body. Lucy looked at Charlotte with a complicated look, puffed her lips, then sorted out her thoughts and began to tell the secret that had been hidden in her heart. Charlotte sat on Lucy's bed, listening quietly to the girl's narration. The first thing the girl said was the place where she had lived since she was a child, a cold home. In the room, the girl's weak voice kept ringing. Although this weak voice would occasionally become intense due to the girl's emotions, no matter what the girl's tone was or what she said, Charlotte never made a sound from beginning to end, acting as the best listener. The girl's story was not long, and it was basically told in just 10 minutes. At the end, her voice was a little choked, and her eyes were slightly red. Obviously, talking about this past that she had always been reluctant to mention made her emotions fluctuate greatly. That's all I want to say. After finishing her words, Lucy turned to look at Charlotte. Charlotte, who had remained silent for 10 minutes, suddenly stood up from the bed, stretched her arms and said lazily, "What?" It turned out to be a story about a willful rich girl running away from home. I thought it would be so exciting. You guy. Lucy looked at Charlotte angrily. She had made a great determination to tell all this, but this guy seemed very disappointed. Not only did he not come to comfort her, but he also complained that it was not exciting enough. Humph. Lucy turned her head away angrily. She decided not to pay any attention to this heartless guy for 5 minutes. Charlotte leaned against the windowsill and glanced at the angry Lucy. Don't worry, no matter how unhappy your life is, it's all in the past. At least you are very happy now, right? You have joined your favorite guild and made so many friends. Why bother thinking about those unhappy things in the past? Is he comforting himself? Hearing Charlotte's words, Lucy thought secretly in her heart. Humph, since you still have a conscience, I will forgive you. The idea of ignoring someone for 5 minutes was immediately thrown out of the window by Lucy, but when she turned her head to look at Charlotte again, she said with some concern, "Charlotte. What's wrong again?" Hearing the girl's tone, Charlotte said helplessly, "This girl seems to be a little worried." "I am a little worried. The Phantom sent 2 of the 4 elements to capture me this time, and because of Heartfilia's identity, do you think the Phantom's attack on Fairy Tale this time was because of me?" Lucy hesitated for a while, but still expressed her uneasy guess. Charlotte didn't expect that she had guessed the reason before she told her. It seems that she is very sensitive about this matter. So what if it is, so what if it isn't? Charlotte said calmly. If so, I think if you hand me over, this matter can be resolved and no one will be hurt again. Lucy walked to Charlotte, her tone was a little fierce. Hearing this, Charlotte didn't know what this girl was thinking. He said with a strong contempt in his tone, "Don't think too much. Although this matter may have something to do with you, don't think of yourself as too important. Believe me, you are just an insignificant part of it." Although she knew that Charlotte was comforting herself, Lucy still felt that it was too hurtful. What does it mean to be dispensable? And Charlotte looked at Lucy calmly and said calmly, "No matter what, I am half a guide for you to join Fairy Tale. Unless you want to quit Fairy Tale, no one can take you away, not even Phantom, Joseph, or even your father. Remember, I said. Feeling the strong confidence revealed in Charlotte's words, Lucy was moved and couldn't help asking, "What did you say?" "That's right, I said it." Charlotte's words were still extremely confident. "Although it may sound a bit boastful, I will remember it." "Thank you, Charlotte." Lucy smiled and said. "Now that I have remembered it, I will put the previous thought to rest," Charlotte said with some dissatisfaction. "You are the first person who said that I was bragging. I want you to remember one more thing. This is the first and last time you say something like this. You will soon understand whether it is bragging or not." "Yes, I remember it all." Lucy nodded, looking at Charlotte with a more serious look. Since she met Charlotte, this was the first time that Charlotte showed such confidence and pride in front of her. However, Charlotte looked even more handsome than before. For some reason, she suddenly became curious about Charlotte's past, or rather, she was curious about everything about Charlotte. "Charlotte, what was your past like?" Lucy asked. "Sorry, no comment," Charlotte said. "What? I told you everything about my past." Lucy pouted and said dissatisfiedly. "If I remember correctly, it seems that you said you would tell me," Charlotte said jokingly. Hearing this, Lucy was a little jumpy, but she could do nothing about it, because it was indeed her decision to tell Charlotte. At this time, Charlotte suddenly turned around, looked out the window, and frowned slightly. "Charlotte, what's wrong with you?" Lucy asked in confusion. "Nothing, just a bad feeling." "What ominous premonition?" "I have a feeling that something bad is going to happen to President Makarov and his team on this trip." Charlotte thought of Joseph's cunning smile and said in a low voice. "No way, didn't Miss Myra say that the president is the 10th saint and Urza and Natsu went with them, so nothing will happen?" Lucy said in a somewhat stiff tone. "Besides, this is just a premonition, and premonitions are generally not true, so don't worry." "Really?" Charlotte glanced at Lucy and said, "But every time my premonition appears, it has never been wrong." Chapter 97. Every premonition has never been wrong. Hearing Charlotte's words, Lucy's tone became even stiffer. "This is too scary." Although Charlotte's words made Lucy a little unbelievable, she could see that Charlotte was telling the truth without any jokes. Because of this, Lucy, who was originally full of confidence in Makarov and others because of Myra's words, couldn't help but become uneasy. At this time, outside the window, a blue bird suddenly flew towards the two of them, or to be precise, towards Charlotte. The blue bird flapped its wings and stopped in front of Charlotte. In its claws, it was holding an envelope. At just one glance, Charlotte could see that both the blue bird and the envelope were made of magic power, and he was very familiar with the magic aura on it, which was Myra's. This was a message from Myra to him. Charlotte tapped lightly on the envelope, an ray of light shone on the envelope. On the light, a miniature shadow of Myra emerged. "Charlotte, come to the guild quickly, something big has happened." As soon as Myra's phantom appeared, she spoke anxiously, urging Charlotte to go back. After that, Myra's phantom and the blue bird transformed by magic disappeared into the air like bubbles. "Let's go." Charlotte pulled Lucy up with one hand, supported herself on the windowsill with the other, and jumped out of the window. Before Lucy could scream, she suddenly felt her body lighten. When she reacted, she was already on the street downstairs. "Charlotte, Miss Myra is so anxious, could it be that the president and the others?" Following behind Charlotte, Lucy asked worriedly. When she heard the news about Myra, she immediately thought of Charlotte's premonition. She also had a premonition in her mind, that is, Charlotte's premonition came true. "You'll know when you get there." Charlotte didn't say much, holding Lucy's hand, and the speed suddenly increased a little. Lucy could faintly hear the wind blowing past her ears. However, when the guild was just ahead, Lucy suddenly remembered something and said, "Charlotte, those 2 4 elements are still in my house, don't you need to take care of them?" "Don't worry, one of them can't wake up for the time being, and the other will stay there obediently if nothing unexpected happens." After Charlotte finished speaking, the two of them had already arrived at the door of the guild. Pushing the door and entering the guild, Charlotte saw that all the members who followed President Makarov to the battle had returned, but they all looked very bad, and nearly half of them were more or less injured. In addition, their spirits seemed even more decadent, which was completely different from the high morale before the battle. Even Urza, the fairy queen, was in low spirits, without the confident heroic demeanor she had before. Natsu was even more unwilling, and he was obviously holding back a rage in his heart. He grinned from time to time and wanted to vent but had nowhere to vent. Moreover, after looking around among the crowd, Charlotte did not find old man Makarov. "Charlo, brother Charlotte." Myra and Lysina walked up quickly when they saw Charlotte. Charlotte nodded at them and asked, "What's going on? Why can't I see President Makarov?" "The president was sent to Grandma Polyasika in the eastern forest." Lysina answered. Her tone was very low, probably considering that Charlotte had just arrived and was not familiar with the place. She explained, "Granny Polyasika is a healing wizard with superb medical skills. The president was seriously injured and his magic power was completely gone. Ordinary doctors can't treat him at all. Only Grandma Polyasika can save him." Myra added. "What happened? The president is so strong, how could this happen?" After listening to Lysina and Myra's words, Lucy said in disbelief. Although she is still just a rookie, she also knows that for a wizard, especially a stronger wizard, magic power is equivalent to their life. Unlike the normal consumption when using magic, what Myra just said is that the magic power is completely lost. Doesn't this mean that President Makarov's life is in danger? Let me speak for myself." Without waiting for Myra and Lysina to continue, Urza walked up with heavy steps and spoke in a low voice. "When we attacked the Phantom, we had the absolute upper hand at first. After the president sensed Joseph's breath, he went to the roof of the Phantom Guild alone to fight him. However, the president had just gone up and fell down without making any noise. Then all his magic power disappeared. With the president in trouble, everyone's morale was particularly low. I had no choice but to lead everyone to retreat." At this point, Urza was already full of anger. She punched a pillar next to her, and a big hole appeared on the pillar. She blamed herself very much and said, If I had followed him at that time, maybe the president wouldn't have gotten into trouble. It's all my fault." "Urza, this has nothing to do with you, it's just that Joseph is too cunning." Myra comforted. "He must have used some trick to make the president become like this." Lysina snorted with anger on her face. In any case, the counterattack launched by Fairy Tail against Phantom Ghost this time can be said to have completely failed. Phantom Ghost had obviously planned this plot for a long time. In the case of deliberate calculation, Fairy Tail's counterattack this time almost completely fell into the trap of Phantom Ghost. However, even if Charlotte thought that Fairy Tail's counterattack would fail, she did not expect it to fail so miserably. Makarov, who has the strength of the 10 holy mages, has completely lost his combat effectiveness, and even his life is in danger. Not long after, Alzik and Biska, who sent the president to the eastern forest, returned to the guild. Seeing the two, the people in the guild surrounded them and asked about Makarov's situation. But the answers of the two made all the members of Fairy Tail fall to the bottom of the valley, because Polyasika said that unless someone can recover some of Makarov's magic power that was drawn away, it would be too difficult for Makarov to recover. For a time, the entire guild was shrouded in a dark cloud. "Charlotte, what are you thinking about?" Lucy was also very heavy in her heart. She subconsciously turned her eyes to Charlotte, who was standing beside her. Seeing that the latter was silent and seemed to be thinking about something, she asked. Chapter 98. "Charlotte, what are you thinking about?" Hearing Lucy's words, Charlotte, who was deep in thought, came back to his senses. He shook his head and said, "Nothing." Lucy just blinked and didn't ask any more questions. Suddenly, Charlotte raised his eyes and looked out the door. He narrowed his eyes, and a hidden light flashed in his eyes. Then he said to Lucy, "I have something to go out for." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared in front of Lucy. Only Lucy, Myra, Lysina, and Urza, who were beside Charlotte, knew of Charlotte's sudden departure. The four of them were a little puzzled as to why Charlotte left suddenly at this time. Among the four, Myra, Lysina and Lucy all had absolute trust in Charlotte, and although Urza did not have the same attitude as the first three, she did not think too much while being puzzled. Magnolia, Eastern Forest. Swish! The sound of breaking wind sounded in the forest, and a figure suddenly appeared here. It was Charlotte who left the guild. In front of him, there was another figure. The appearance of this figure was the appearance is very similar to Charlotte's previous outfit, both of them are covered in black robes, but his face is not half covered like Charlotte's, but completely blocked by black cloth. No matter from which angle, his face cannot be seen clearly. Behind this person, there are 7 magic wands of different lengths, each of which is inlaid with magic crystals, which contain amazing magic power. As if hearing the movement behind him, this person turned around, and after looking at Charlotte, there was no surprise in the only eyes on his face, as if he had expected Charlotte to come. He said lightly, "Charlotte, long time no see. I didn't expect to meet you in the guild when I came back this time. It's been a while since we last met." Charlotte stared into the man's eyes and spoke in the same calm tone, "Mr. Gang. Mr. Gang, one of the strongest candidates of the Magic Guild Fairy Tale, is also the most mysterious member of Fairy Tale. At this time, you should still be looking for ways to stop that magic all over the world." Charlotte smiled and said, "It seems that the ghost incident this time has forced you to temporarily give up your mission. Besides, that is your masterpiece." As he said that, Charlotte pointed to the sky above the depths of the forest. Although it didn't look strange there, Charlotte could clearly feel that a huge amount of magic power was floating in the sky. The breath of that magic power was exactly Makarov's. Makarov's lost magic power appeared here, which was obviously the masterpiece of the guy in front of him. With these lost magic powers, according to Polyasica, Makarov's condition will recover soon. Although this guy seems indifferent to the guild, he is actually always paying attention to his guild while performing his tasks. "I am also a member of the guild," Mist Gang just replied lightly. After that, he waved his hand and a large black flag floated out from behind. On each flag, the same emblem was engraved, which was the guild emblem of the Phantom Ruler. Seeing this scene, Charlotte was a little surprised. This guy actually wiped out most of the Phantom branches in such a short time. I just don't know if Joseph knows this news. If he knows, I believe his expression will be very interesting. "You came here to join Fairy Tale?" Mr. Gang asked. Although he didn't have much contact with Charlotte, he knew very well how abnormal this guy's strength was. When he saw Charlotte showing his strength for the first time, even his state of mind that had been honed for many years was shocked. If Charlotte joined Fairy Tale, then the strength of Fairy Tale would definitely increase dramatically. Hearing this, Charlotte smiled lightly and said, "Not yet. Not yet." A ripple flashed across Mr. Gang's eyes, and then he understood and said, "I understand. I'm leaving. No need to tell everyone that I've been back." After saying this, Mr. Gang turned around very casually, without any nostalgia. Looking at Mr. Gang's departing back, Charlotte suddenly shouted, "Hey!" Mr. Gang didn't look back, but he stopped. "Spectre is about to attack, are you sure you want to leave?" Charlotte said. Mr. Gang still did not answer, and said lightly, "With you here, Spectre is powerless, and never underestimate Fairy Tale. Is there anything else?" Charlotte touched his nose. He was very satisfied with Mr. Gang's answer. He looked at the latter's back and said slowly, "If you need any help, please let me know at any time." After hearing what Charlotte said, Mr. Gang was silent for a while, then nodded gently, walked away and gradually disappeared at the end of the forest. Charlotte looked up at the magic power floating in the sky. At this time, the magic power was gradually flowing towards a small wooden house below. Charlotte knew that the small wooden house was where Polyasica lived. Obviously, she was now transferring Makarov's lost magic power back into his body to help him recover. This Mr. Gang does have some tricks. The acquaintance with Mr. Gang was indeed somewhat clever. When Charlotte traveled around the continent in search of the whereabouts of the Dark Guild, he accidentally encountered the strange vortex magic scene that he had noticed when he first entered the past Charlotte in the Beast King Mountains. The first time he encountered this scene, he was unable to go and find out because he had forced himself out of the past mode. Now that he encountered it again, he naturally would not miss it. It was at that time that he met Mr. Gang, and Mr. Gang was using a special magic to prevent the vortex magic from taking shape. When Mr. Gang's magic power was a little weak, Charlotte helped him a little, and the two of them got to know each other in such a simple way. And they traveled together for a while. During the travel, as the two became more and more familiar with each other, Charlotte also learned some things from Mr. Gang, which made him understand that this Mr. Gang was really not simple, and he also knew that the strange vortex magic was a super subspace magic called Soul, which was an extremely terrifying magic, and Miss Gang's mission was to prevent the emergence of Soul. Buzz. When Charlotte was thinking about it, he suddenly felt a slight shaking under his feet. And the frequency of this shaking was still increasing. He looked up and looked outside the forest. He could vaguely see a huge black shadow approaching Magnolia, to be precise, approaching Fairy Tale. Seeing this, Charlotte whispered to himself. Is it so soon, Joseph? Chapter 99. Boom boom. Outside Magnolia, a huge black shadow is approaching the city. As the giant shadow approaches, both the ordinary residents living in Magnolia and the members of Fairy Tale gradually see the appearance of the black shadow. It is a magnificent castle. At the bottom of the castle, there are 3 thick mechanical legs extending on both sides. It is these 6 mechanical legs that support this huge castle and bring it here step by step from another city. At the top of the castle, a black emblem is engraved on it. This emblem is the guild emblem of the Magic Guild Phantom Ruler. And this movable castle is the guild headquarters of Phantom Ruler, 6-foot walking guild. In the center of the castle, a figure stands on it. This person has a pointed face and 2 weird 7-bearded mustaches on his mouth. Although this person is not good looking, his identity is extremely prominent. He is the president of Phantom Ruler, Joseph Pola. One of the 10 holy mages, who is as famous as Makarov, the president of Fairy Tale. When Fairy Tale counterattacked their guild not long ago, he set a trap and used the ability of the leader of the 4 elements, Aliyah, to wipe out all the magic power of his biggest rival Makarov. In his opinion, Fairy Tale without Makarov, even if there are still a group of S-class wizards such as Urza and Myra Jane, will never be able to stop his attack this time. After all, he came here this time, but brought the guild's biggest trump card, the mobile guild headquarters, directly with him. This alone is enough for them to drink a pot. Whenever Joseph thinks of the almost inflated development of Fairy Tale in the past few years, he will feel a strong hatred in his heart. The endless magical geniuses, Guildarts, Mist Gang, Laxus, Urza, Myra Jane, the fire dragon Natsu and the guy named Grey who masters the ice shape magic. Each of them has unique strength or potential. Although his ghost ruler is absolutely ahead of other guilds in the kingdom in terms of members and financial resources, it is at a disadvantage compared to Fairy Tale, which has such a group of people. And this is exactly what he cannot tolerate. The first guild in the kingdom of Fiori can only be his ghost ruler. Anyone who hinders his ambitions, he will destroy them one by one, no matter what means. Standing on the guild castle, Joseph looked down at the approaching Fairy Tale, with a cold light flashing in his ugly eyes. However, when he saw the intact guild building of Fairy Tale, his brows slightly frowned. He clearly remembered that his subordinate Gajeel had destroyed the guild a few days ago. This was what Gajeel told him personally. He didn't think Gajeel would lie to him on such a matter. Similarly, he didn't believe that the people of Fairy Tale could rebuild the guild in such a short time. There must be something fishy. Thinking of this, he thought of Thor and Juvia he sent out. In the case of the emptiness behind Fairy Tale, he sent 2 generals of the 4 elements for such a task. It can be seen that he attaches great importance to this matter. However, the 2 people he sent out have not returned yet, and even no information has been sent back. This made him feel that something was wrong. Could it be that the strongest candidates of Fairy Tale have all returned at this time? If this is true, then his plan to destroy Fairy Tale in one fell swoop may have many twists and turns. But soon, his brows relaxed again, and a cruel smile appeared on his ugly face. I don't know how your guild recovered, but since I was able to destroy it once, I can destroy it a second time. And this time, I will destroy the entire Fairy Tale. Makarov, I hope you will like my gift when you wake up. At this time, the huge 6-legged walking guild had already moved in front of the Fairy Tale guild, and Joseph standing on it suddenly sounded with a murderous voice. Magic Cluster Cannon Jupiter, ready. At Joseph's command, a large door in the center of the castle opened to both sides, and a long cannon barrel slowly extended from it, with the black muzzle facing the Fairy Tale in front. At the muzzle, magic power continued to gather. That's a magic cluster cannon. If this blast hits our guild, it's likely that it will be blown away. Although most members saw the magic cluster cannon for the first time, they had heard a lot about it before and understood the destructive power it possessed. However, they did not expect that the Phantom's attack this time would not only come so quickly, but also come directly with their famous 6-foot walking guild, and as soon as they arrived, they launched an attack on them with this amazingly destructive magic cluster cannon. Everyone, scatter! Feeling the dangerous aura coming from the muzzle, Urza shouted, rushed out of the guild, came to the front of everyone, and faced the muzzle of Jupiter. Urza, what do you want to do? Myra asked anxiously. Urza's behavior made her have a bad guess. Urza did not answer, but her next action confirmed Myra's guess. Change clothes, diamond armor. The light of changing clothes shone, and Urza's armor suddenly changed. With silver and dark blue as the base, her whole body was covered with a layer of heavy armor, and each hand held a silver-white semicircular shield. This is the diamond armor with the strongest defense. Is Ms. Urza trying to use her body to block the magic cluster cannon? No, Miss Urza, you will die if you do that. After Urza finished changing her clothes, the fairy tale members around her guessed Urza's plan and were horrified. Urza, no, even if you use the diamond armor to block the magic cluster cannon, you will lose your combat effectiveness. As the only female wizard in the guild who can match Urza's strength, and once Urza's biggest rival, Myra can be said to be the one who knows the former's strength best, so she also knows the danger best. However, after hearing Myra's words, Urza did not intend to retreat at all, but just put the shields on both hands together to form a complete arc shield in front of her. Then she turned her head slightly, looked at Myra who looked anxious, and said in a heavy tone. The guild has been destroyed once, I will never allow it to be destroyed a second time. As she spoke, she looked at Myra with a flash of determination, her tone slightly relaxed, and said to Myra. If I fall, the responsibility of protecting everyone in the guild will be left to you, Myra. Chapter 100. If I fall, the responsibility of protecting the guild and everyone will be handed over to you, Myra. Hearing Urza's heavy words, Myra knew that she was determined, so she could only nod heavily and promise, I will, no matter who it is, can't hurt our guild and partners. The conversation between the two was not deliberately concealed, so the members around heard it clearly, and everyone's face was full of anxiety, looking at Urza wearing diamond armor, the armor that looked extremely heavy, but in their eyes at this time, it seemed extremely fragile, and could not protect the safety of their great queen at all. Charlotte, brother Charlotte, where have you been? At this time, Lysina and Lucy, who were at the back of the crowd, had exactly the same idea in their minds. They both thought of Charlotte first, and their eyes kept looking around, trying to find that handsome figure. However, to their disappointment, they still couldn't find it until the moment the magic cluster cannon was fired. Boom! A large amount of magic power had been condensed in front of the Jupiter cannon hole. The huge magic light flashed, the barrel trembled, and a terrifying shock wave sprayed out from it, setting off an extremely violent air wave. The fluctuations emitted by Jupiter alone frightened the people of Fairy Tale, and made them even more worried. Would Urza, who was about to face this terrifying shock wave, really survive? Thinking of this scene, they all subconsciously closed their eyes one by one. Everyone, get lost! Fairy Tale. Seeing Jupiter successfully launched, the ugly smile on Joseph's face standing on the guild castle became even more cruel. That is. In the crowd, Myra, who still had her eyes open, was slightly startled when Jupiter's shock wave hit Urza. She vaguely saw a blue light flashing in front of Urza, and at the same time, a blue magic circle appeared. Whoosh! The air wave disappeared. The shock wave launched by Jupiter came quickly and disappeared quickly. Feeling the disappearance of the terrifying aura, the people around slowly opened their eyes with trepidation, fearing that they would see the terrible scene. When they opened their eyes and looked forward, almost everyone subconsciously opened their mouths wide, with a look of surprise. They saw that their queen Urza was still standing straight in front, still wearing the heavy diamond armor. Both the armor and the person were in a state of intactness. They naturally did not think that Urza's strength was strong enough to block the attack of the magic cluster cannon known for its destructive power, and she was unharmed. Everyone's eyes gradually moved to the front of Urza, where a figure appeared without knowing when. Obviously, it was not Urza who actually blocked the magic cluster cannon, but this person. Charlotte. When they saw the man's face clearly, almost everyone shouted in surprise. The man who appeared in front of Urza at some point and took the attack of the magic cluster cannon on her behalf was Charlotte, who had disappeared for a while. Sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. Charlotte held a silver-white samurai sword in front of him. He tilted his head slightly, turned his face to the crowd, and smiled faintly. At the intersection of the blade and the handle of the samurai sword in his hand, a gorgeous red lotus seemed to be engraved on the silver-white blade. It was the ultimate sword that had left the body, Red Lotus Heavenly Dance. Brother Charlotte, you finally showed up. After hearing Charlotte's words, Lysina's clear voice suddenly rang out, including Lucy who was standing beside her, who also made a relieved gesture. The heart that had been hanging in her throat also fell down, as if everything would be solved as long as Charlotte came. Looking at the not-so-broad arms, she felt an inexplicable sense of security in her heart. Except for Lysina, the others did not speak. After being surprised, they all looked at Charlotte with confused eyes, because they found that Charlotte at this time, like Urza, was also unharmed, and even his clothes did not show any signs of damage. Is this like the state of being hit by a magic cluster cannon? Even Myra was also a little confused, because although she had just noticed the appearance of Charlotte's magic power, and knew earlier than everyone else that it was Charlotte who was blocking Urza, but she did not see how the latter blocked the shock wave shot by Jupiter. The only person who knew this was probably Urza, who was originally prepared to take Jupiter's attack head-on. When the shock wave hit, she remained fully focused, so at the last moment, she witnessed Charlotte appear in front of her as if teleporting, blocking this terrifying blow for her. The samurai's long sword was held horizontally in front of her, and a deep blue magic circle condensed on the blade. The moment it came into contact with the attack of the magic cluster cannon, the magic circle shone with blue light and slowly rotated counterclockwise, and then the powerful shock wave seemed to be swallowed up and disappeared into thin air. This scene lingered in Urza's mind for a long time. After a while, the light of Urza's change of clothes shone again, and the diamond armor turned back into the armor she usually wore. "Thank you very much." After staring at Charlotte for a long time with her beautiful eyes, Urza slowly spoke. This thank you was not only for Charlotte protecting her, but also for him defending her favorite guild again, because even if she was wearing the most defensive diamond armor, she was not absolutely sure that she could block Jupiter's attack just now. "Thank you, no need." Charlotte's eyes fell on Urza's delicate and beautiful face, and he smiled slightly and said, "I don't have the habit of letting a woman get hurt in front of me, not to mention. You've been hurt enough. As a queen, I would feel bad if you got hurt."